Oh, hey, folks. Today's episode is brought to you by one of my favorite sponsors, SunsetLakeCebede.com. SunsetLakeCebede.com has all sorts of Cebede products. This doesn't show up. I got to get the other one. I don't know where that is. But SunsetLakeCebede.com, they have tinctures. They have tinctures in multiple different concentrations. They have different flavors. They have some with melatonin so that it increases your ability to go to sleep. Also, they have gummies. They have sour gummies. They have gummies with melatonin, again, for your sleep and specifically for my sleep. Also, they have Cebede fudge and Cebede coffee, which is my weekend brew. Honestly, I get my mouth waters when I start thinking about that. I mean, great roasts, but also infused with Cebede. They also have smokables that you can add to your other smokables, or just smoke on their own as like a I don't know, an after dinner aperitif. I don't know.
Postprandial.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. But also they're a great company. They are mostly employee owned. They $20 minimum wage. They use integrated pest management. So there's no pesticides in your Cebede, and all of it is third party tested. So you know what's in there, and they give you a breakdown of each product you buy as it's been tested. They also use regenerative farming practices. So they take care of the soil, and they are movement partners. In the past, they have donated thousands, tens of thousands of dollars to strike funds, to food pantries, refugee resettlement, through carceral reform, and on. And just most recently, they had a tincture sale, and they donated $5,000 to the Vermont Flooding Relief Fund. So thanks on behalf of Sunset Lake to our listeners. Just an all-around great company, great product, SunsetLakeCebede.com. Check them out. Use the coupon code Left is Best. Get 20% off. I mean, come on. SunsetLakeCebede.com. You will be happy you did. All right, now it is time for the show.
Every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday. Tuesday, Casual Tuesday. Wednesday, Casual Hump Day. Thursday, Casual Thurs. That's what we call it. And Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, July 21st, 2023. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Washington Bureau Chief of the Intercept, co-host of Breaking Points, Ryan Grimm will be joining us. And then the eponymously named Matthew Film Guy. Did I get that right? I don't think that's right. Will be joining us. Just breaking, judge sets the Trump stolen documents case for May of 2024. Or that period known between just about wrapping up the Republican primary nomination and the convention.
That is fun for the whole family.
Oh my God. Meanwhile, less happy news. Searing heat continues across the globe as July likely the hottest the Earth has seen in recorded history. And while the actors' strike enters week 2, as IATSE stage workers vote to authorize a strike themselves. And with 10 days to go before the potential over 300,000 UPS workers strike, UPS pilots pledge that they won't cross the Teamsters picket lines. That's important, folks. After 5 months, the White House gives up on Manchin and Sinema. Julie Su will remain acting labor secretary, but shan't become labor secretary. Chuck Grassley releases unverified anonymous accusation made to the FBI in a bid to revive the Hunter Biden investigation. Ron DeSantis hopes to reinvigorate his campaign by suing Bud Light for wokeness. Meanwhile, new Florida teaching standards approved on Wednesday say African Americans received personal benefit from slavery.
Jesus.
Arizona judge allows trans girls to compete in high school sports as a suit progresses to prevent them from competing in high school sports. Incidentally, we're talking 2 kids. There's an abortion ban. The abortion ban in Texas has likely increased infant mortality. And lastly, Steven Crowder sent dick pics to his employees on the reg and led Bible classes to endorse more male physical intimacy.
That's what it means to be a mighty man of valor.
All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. We will get to those Bible studies in a moment. But first, Emma Vigeland.
Hello.
My co-host here. It's Casual
Matt's very
Friday.
Quick on the draw these days.
Yeah, no,
with
he
the
is
drops.
he is a top form.
Whoopsie.
So yesterday I was out on the picket lines. I went to actually 2. I don't think I sent you clips from both, but I went to 2 different picket lines. I went to one down in front of Netflix and HBO. I should say I am a member of SAG-AFTRA. I have, I mean, I guess I don't know when my last Bob's Burgers gig was. It was probably 4 or 5 months ago. But that's basically all I've been doing is SAG-AFTRA. I mean, like sort of any type of. But with that said, went to the picket lines down in front of Netflix and HBO, and then
Where are those offices? Just out of curiosity.
They're on like 19th Street. I had no idea.
Really?
Yeah, in Broadway. I had no idea.
Oh, wow.
And then went up and picketed in front of 30 Rockefeller Place, which is fun because that's right in front of the NBC, like the MSNBC studios. That's the only time I go up there. Generally, I went to both, and they were both packed. Like they keep you in a sort of like gated area, and there was almost, I mean, you got to keep walking. I think that's the law, actually. And it was almost impossible to do. There was, I mean, we're talking, I don't know, several hundred at each place. And this is going on a daily basis. And I imagine people do once a week or something like this. So it's pretty good to see that many people. And there was like 1,000 people in Atlanta. The head of the negotiating team, oh shoot, I can't remember his name now. But he was down at one of the picket areas. We should try and get him on the show. He's very well spoken and seems like a very smart guy. Meanwhile, Yahtzee voted to authorize a strike, and so things are really the heat is really turning up. It's going to be interesting if the UPS workers go on strike. We're going to have, just within 2 unions, essentially, close to 500,000 people on strike in this country. That is a lot of people.
Largest strike wave since neoliberalism.
Right. Yeah. And so what's that? Less than 14 days, right? Or almost a week.
No, 10 days.
10 days.
July 31st is my understanding is where the deadline is.
Yeah.
All right. One thing, though, I saw as I was, picketing yesterday that on my Twitter phone, and I'm rarely on Twitter these days, but was RFK's testimony. There's really 2 sort of separate things I want to do, but I guess it makes more sense to do that clip that we just pulled these are assertions that Kennedy is making in defense of, this is ostensibly, this hearing was about misinformation. And so they brought in, about censorship.
Yeah.
And Kennedy here is making the argument that he was censored for providing the following facts and truth. And so he's going to go through this. And these are things that he's been repeating across wherever opportunity he has. I want you to listen to these things. It's really fascinating to me because obviously, I had a relationship with Kennedy. I mean, I may still, I don't know. But he lays this stuff out and it sounds really believable, what he's saying. It sounds really believable. And all I can tell you is that, I think for him, this is an article of faith in the same way that a religious preacher will go on and talk about these, this and that. But it's easier for us who don't subscribe to religion to say, what, there isn't necessarily a big guy or God didn't get mad at the gays and then send tornadoes somewhere. But this is the only explanation I have for this is the same thing. These are articles of faith for him. He sees these facts and figures somewhere, I don't know where, and gloms onto them and repeats them with an incredible amount of confidence. He's a very smart person. Listen to this stuff, and then we're going to play something that I found from a Twitter person. Go ahead.
And in fact, the term misinformation did not denote falsehood or veracity. Rather, it was a euphemism for any information that departed from government orthodoxies. And it is very dangerous. And, the congressman a minute ago said 1 million people have died because of misinformation about vaccines in this country. But in fact, our country had one of the highest vaccination rates in the world and the worst health outcomes. We have 4.2% of the global population. We had 16% of the COVID deaths. Blacks in Haiti with a 1% vaccination rate were dying at a rate of 15 per million population. And same in Nigeria, had a 1.3 vaccination rate. They were dying at 1 in 14 per million population, 14 per million population. In our country, blacks were dying at 3,000 per million population, 200 times the death rates in other countries. And this holds throughout the world. We needed information. We should have all been sharing information openly and talking to the 15 million doctors through the internet who were treating patients on the front line all over the world and channeling the best therapies, the most successful treatments, so that we could all figure
out. All right, pause it there. Okay. And yes, we should be doing that where where doctors throughout the world are sharing. They were. Mm-hmm. They were doing that. I mean, we have, throughout COVID, we spoke to various epidemiologists and to people who've been on the front lines of this. Mark Elaine Derry, literally a prime example of one of those people. He was involved in the Ebola stuff. He had worked in Africa. He's in constant communication. No relationship to the pharmaceutical industry whatsoever. A very progressive lefty type of guy, and so that the last part was happening, but the stuff about Nigeria, the stuff about Haiti, as it goes by you quickly, you go, wow, those are what's going on with those numbers. And if you say that, we had, in fact, he said our country had one of the worst outcomes. Here is a Twitter user called The Real Truther. I just started following him because he did a very good job of breaking down. It was, not what Bobby said right there, but those same talking points that he's been using in other places. And it really is astonishing. It goes by relatively quick. But take a look at how easily debunked these things are in terms of and think about how sort of like compelling that testimony was by Kennedy. And now look at this. This is clip number 4. Yeah, go ahead.
Many in your party who will argue that vaccines work. They took a crisis and seriously cut down the deaths that would have been a lot higher without it, you say?
I would disagree with you on that. I don't think the science supports that. I don't think you can show me any scientific study that shows that.
There's literally thousands of studies from around the world that prove the vaccines reduce hospitalizations and deaths.
There's a direct correlation between excess deaths. The deaths in the nations that heavily vaccinated, which were much higher than those that didn't.
If we look at 2021 excess mortality, the gold standard in comparison, we can see the highest vaccinated countries have the lowest excess deaths and the lowest vaccinated countries have the highest. If we combine 2021 and 2022, we see a similar correlation with Bulgaria with the lowest vaccine rates in Europe all the way on the left and Sweden all the way on the right. Speaking of Sweden, we can see 86% of adults vaccinated with the highest booster rate in Europe and the lowest excess since vaccination with negative excess in 18 to 44-year-olds. When we look at the US, it's similar with the 10 most vaccinated states having the lowest excess since vaccines were widely available and the 10 least vaccinated states having the highest.
The nations that didn't vaccinate had the lowest death rate. For example, Nigeria had a 1.5 vaccination rate and it had a 14 deaths per million population.
This is just outright dishonest misinformation. Africa has the youngest population of any continent with a median age of 18. In Nigeria, only 3% of their population is over 65. They don't test and they don't report excess deaths at all. Only 10% of deaths in Nigeria are actually registered. If we look at 2020, back when nobody was vaccinated, we can see the significant difference back then because of their lack of testing and reporting and their young median age.
Haiti had the same thing, almost no vaccination, had 15 deaths per million populations.
If we look at Haiti, their median age is 23 years old. They don't test often for the virus, and their excess deaths were 36 times the reported COVID deaths.
We were one of the most heavily vaccinated countries in the world. We had the highest death rate in the world.
And another lie, the United States did not have even close to the highest vaccine rate or the highest death rate in the world.
Oh, that's not a success story.
And if we look at the rates of unvaccinated versus vaccinated, we can see the unvaxxed died at significantly higher rates. And of course, this was replicated everywhere around the world.
And particularly the nations that used alternative treatments like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine.
This guy's running for president?
Okay.
I mean, that was well done.
That was
Very
well done. We should put up the Real Truthers Twitter feed handle there so that people can go follow this guy. And, you know, I mean, you begin to see how this sort of conspiracy stuff works. And I have no explanation for you know, obviously Kennedy doesn't want to go in front of Congress and perjure himself. We have another clip later where he talks, where he says that I do not tell other people to not get vaccinated. I am not an anti-vaxxer. We will play another clip that debunks that later in the program. But all that said, it's upsetting, but it's important for people to, you know, be aware of this information.
Let me just add one thing before we wrap. Like, I think that in his initial testimony, his conflation of Black people in Haiti and in Nigeria with American Black people or his usage of that as some sort of comparison was strange in and of itself, because it's like some derivation of race essentialism, right? Like the people that draw essentially sickle cell to the color of one's skin as opposed to being near places where there are higher instances of malaria and things like that.
Right.
I mean, that was another subtle thing that he did there, that he's not being a race essentialist. He's not an anti-vaxxer, but the information that he's espousing backs up those anti-science, anti-biology claims. You don't just get to say you're not an anti-vaxxer because you don't tell individual people don't get vaccinated. It's about the information that you're espousing. And I just thought that was a very troubling rhetorical trick that he relied upon in that testimony.
Yeah. And on top of which, he also has told individuals not to get vaccinated.
Right.
We'll talk about that. But yes, your
but
point
when you
stands.
said the religious element, Sam, like that is what it is. Like religious fundamentalists, they give you the tip of the iceberg, right? And they make they make it sound more appealing. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. And then you go behind closed door meetings and it's recorded by the New York Post or recorded by someone sent to the Post. And he's saying that COVID is a bioweapon designed to hurt other people, but protect Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese people. And then that's race essentialism too. So it's scary stuff when you boil it down to its like most pure form.
All right, we got to take a quick break, and we will get to Ryan Grimm, who is there was just a story about Ryan Grimm himself, about he had a problem with Jesse Waters. We'll get to that with him in a second. But first, a couple words from our sponsors. Folks, you know that I am not necessarily the most sartorially equipped. Is that the right way of putting that? I'm not I've never been the sharpest hack when it came to finding a great clothes, but I have found I have now a favorite brand of shirts. I mean, the pants are great, the shorts are great, I've got those, but I am really blown away by these shirts. Roan's Commuter Collection is literally the most comfortable, the most breathable, and the most flexible shirts that I have ever experienced. It's been like a revelation. I don't know if this always existed or what. I don't know. But Roan helps you get ready for any occasion with their commuter collection. There's super comfortable pants, dress shirts, 1/4 zips, and polos. And here's the thing with the Roan's commuter collection. The shirts look like nice dress shirts. They are nice dress shirts, but the material is not like sort of that classic cotton. It is sort of like a more, I guess, tech material. Has 4-way stretch. It is breathable. It is flexible. It fits great. It looks great. It comes out of the washing machine with no ironing needed. And you can go, I mean, I literally have worn this stuff in the course of a day, from a funeral to a business meeting to a nice dinner.
And I said is that a Roan shirt? Because it looked just like a dress shirt.
And it is, I mean, it is a dress shirt. And the other great thing about it is, over the course of that day, which was, I still remember that day because it was such a bizarre sort of series of events. I felt, clean. I didn't stink at the end of the day. They have this technology, I guess they call it gold fusion, which is anti-odor. It's great stuff. And I have a pair of Commuter Collection shorts. I have a pair of Commuter Collection shirt. Well, and I think the shorts are not actually Commuter Collection, but I got them. They're great. And the pants, incredibly comfortable, stretchy as well. The Commuter Collection can get you home through any workday. Also great for travel. Commuter Collection can get you through any workday, straight into whatever comes next. Head to Roan, RHONE, Roan.com/Majority Report. Use the promo code Majority Report. Save 20% off your entire order. Also, we'll put that link in the podcast and YouTube description. Folks know that I like efficiency. One of the ways I've been maintaining my vitamin habit, I have it on subscription. It comes automatically. I do the same thing with my cat litter. We have a very digitized and automated world these days. So why stick to old school mailing and shipping? You don't have to. If you mail or ship often, stamps.com is the answer for you. You can print postage and shipping labels right from your home or office. And you can do this at 2 a.m. in the morning or 3 a.m. or 5 a.m. I mean, the point is you can do it at any time, 24/7, 365. Stamps.com is literally like a post office in your office or home. They have amazing partnerships with USPS and UPS for unbeatable rates, up to 84% off. Plus, Stamps.com automatically tells you your cheapest and fastest shipping options. It's like going to a shipping store, but not having to wait in line. not having to leave your house, go out and sweat, whatever it is that you're doing these days. Stamps.com has been your postage partner for the last 25 years. My daughter's going to college. I remember back when we started this show, I don't know, about 10 years ago plus, maybe. I had her stuffing packages with DVDs, and Stamps.com made the rest of the process completely easy for me. I paid her for that, incidentally. That was not free labor. You can get USPS and UPS service whenever you need it. Stamps.com, again, all you need is a computer and a printer. They'll send you a free scale, so you have everything you need to get started. If you need package pickup, you can schedule it through your Stamps.com dashboard. If you sell products online, Stamps.com seamlessly connects with every major marketplace and shopping cart. Avoid the hassle. Get started with Stamps.com today. Sign up with promo code Majority Report for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial, plus free postage and a free digital scale. There is no long-term commitments, no contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the page, enter the code Majority Report, one word. We will put that link in the podcast and YouTube description. Got to take a quick break. When we come back, Fighting Ryan Grimm will be joining us. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report. It is a pleasure to welcome back to the program the Washington Bureau Chief of the Intercept, also the co-host of the Breaking Points podcast and YouTube show, the unrepentant journalist who, according to The Guardian, Jesse Waters mixer-upper, as it were.
Never repent.
Ryan Grimm, welcome back to the program. I'm just referencing a Guardian story that I read today by Ramon Antonio Vargas, the title of which is "Journalist Unrepentant Over 2016 Fracas" with new Fox News host Jesse Waters. I remember covering this at the time. And I think I mentioned this the other day about what Jesse Waters did in sort of like, I don't know, semi-stalking Amanda Turkle. But will you just reiterate to us what you're unrepentant about?
Well, yeah, Turkle wrote a blog post back in like 2005 or 6, like 7, something like that, critical of Bill O'Reilly. She reached out to him for comment, and he didn't respond to request for comment. Instead, he told Jesse Waters, go get her. And Jesse Waters gets in his car with his little camera crew and chases her 2 hours into Virginia. And they finally catch up to her on the street, some small Virginia town. They catch up to her on the street and put a camera in her face. And she's just completely bewildered. Like, what on earth is going on here?
Right.
Like, this is somebody who reached out to speak with them. It's not as if she was dodging them. They were literally dodging her. So they just try to get some. And I presume that they didn't realize she was going on vacation. And they got like 15 minutes outside of DC. And at that point, they can be like, you know what? Let's turn around. This is getting weird. Instead, they plowed forward and followed her for 2 hours out into Virginia.
And also, I mean, the point is that like, it's not like they contacted her and say, we want your reaction to this. There was no attempt. It was clearly
toward her attempt to get them to comment.
Right. I mean, there was clearly no journalistic purpose to this. It was clearly, and in fact, I think on the footage from your conversation with Waters, he says, Bill wanted me to go after her, so I went after her. I mean, it was literally just, Bill O'Reilly with almost like his personal hit squad. And we should say, Tucker Carlson continued this in the same way, and not necessarily maybe sending out stringers, although I don't know, I didn't watch enough of it, but he certainly would target people.
He would do it in his show, whereas Bill O'Reilly's kind of innovation was he'd send somebody to the professor's like front door,
right?
And Jesse would like put his foot on the door and like jam the camera into the living room and stuff like that.
And so you're at the White House Correspondents' Dinner in 2016. I was not in attendance. I never have gone to that.
We were at the MSNBC party. You should have been there.
No, I don't get invited to those.
You were a contributor at the time.
I probably was, but I don't.
He has to keep a low profile.
I got to keep a low profile.
Ryan,
Isn't this thing on Peacock? Is this thing still on Peacock?
No. We had to end that relationship.
All right.
But that's another story. But so you went up to Jesse Waters. Let's just play a little bit of a clip of it. And just for the heck of it.
She'd come over here, would you apologize? No, but bring her over. I just want to say hi. I ambushed her because O'Reilly told me to get her because she said some really bad shit. What'd she say? I know you're videoing. Of course I am. She denigrated some rape victims, so we had to call her out.
All right. And to be clear, all right, we don't need... She didn't denigrate some rape victims. It's actually the opposite, as far as I can remember. And
of course it is.
And oddly enough, Amanda Turkle was not denigrating rape victims.
Believe it or not.
It's really shocking. And so this goes on, and Waters gets a little bit upset that you're videotaping him, which is sort of ironic.
That's the whole joke. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And he grabs your phone and keeps it in his pocket. And then what happens?
Well, first he throws it, and I went and picked it up, and it was still filming. And I come back and put it back in his face. And I guess I want to comment on why he had just thrown the phone. Then he takes it and puts it in his pocket.
Are you in a tux, Ryan, at this point?
I'm sure. I bet we were.
Everyone's. Yes. I love the visual of like media personalities scuffling in tuxes.
Now, Jesse Waters is a fairly big guy. He's like, I would say he's about 6'2", maybe
6'2", 6'3". Something
he could play a villain like in like a frat house or something when he was younger. He has that energy.
He's also ripping a cigarette in this video.
Right. But Ryan, you're also a pretty big guy.
I'm a good 6'1". Yeah.
Yeah. And so he takes the phone, and then what happens? All I remember is him saying like, "Step off me," or get step off me in some way.
Yeah, because he was telling me that he was going to like he might mail the phone back to me like next week or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like no. Like that is absolutely not happening. And so I think you can hear this part in the video. I warned him. I'm like, give it back or I'm going to take it back. And he's like, get off me. I'm like, I'm going to take it back. And then I went to grab it. And then that's when a very brief fight broke out because there's so many people there.
Right.
That it's within 5 seconds, it's like broken up. But Ken Vogel, to his great credit, was able to snatch it out of Jesse Waters' hand.
The phone.
Yeah, Jesse, you could see like after we got pulled apart, Sean Spicer actually is the one who like pulls us apart.
Wow.
And as after we're pulled apart, you can see him trying to go into the phone. What Ken thought he was doing was trying to delete the video where he had said, "Oh, Bill sent me to go get her." But Ken got it out.
Vogel is now a Times reporter.
Right. Yeah. He was Politico at the time. Yeah. And so he and I started at Politico the same day in 2006, which wasn't even Politico yet. Anyway, so he got it out of his hand before he could delete it.
Oh, sweet. He was trying to delete it. He wouldn't have been able to fully delete it because he would have had to go into your deleted videos.
Then delete and then delete. Yeah.
You can't do it that easily. And so it sounds like you're unrepentant over this.
Unrepentant.
Yeah. Well, I just want.
That's what it means to be a mighty man of valor.
Are we not going to see the rest, though? We're not going to see the
people
rest?
Can go, look at it. I mean, it really is just like a 6-minute confrontation.
Oh, it's 6 minutes? Okay,
yeah.
all right.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
and then all the good stuff happens like you don't see it because
the phone's in his
pocket.
All right. Well, selfishly, I just hadn't seen it before, but I'll check it out after the show.
Yeah, it's worth watching, but good for you. All right, let's get to some, with all due respect, more serious news. This week started. Well, I mean, I guess there was an invite to the Israeli president to speak before Congress. There about 5 or 6 people in the House boycotted it. Earlier in the week, Pramila Jayapal was at Netroots Nation and had said Israel is a racist country. She had to walk that back, or I think she would argue clarify and say, well, the idea of Israel is not racist, but the policies are racist today and apartheid. I mean, it is, I think, fairly uncontroversial to say that there is apartheid in that country now. I think people could argue that the founding of the nation was racist or not. I mean, it's certainly a colonial project. And it's very hard to have a colonial project where there isn't some racism that's associated with that. But the idea that it's apartheid, it seems uncontroversial at this point. And so give me your sense of what the implications of all this has been, because it's been going on for a long time. And I know you've done a lot of reporting on how AIPAC plays in Democratic primaries in this last thing. And it's really significant.
And the latest news on this, just about an hour ago, Jewish Insider reported, based on a source within or close to AIPAC, that they are now recruiting a primary challenger to Jamal Bowman.
Yeah.
This guy, Westchester County Executive Latimer, you might know this guy, and are encouraging him to run because Bowman voted against this resolution that stated 3 things: anti-Semitism and xenophobia are bad. Which I was really surprised that Republicans threw in xenophobia on that. Like,
right.
who was asleep at a switch there? Like, wait, you're against the whole MAGA movement now? But anyway, so anti-Semitism bad, xenophobia bad. Israel is not racist. Israel is not apartheid. Like that's number 2 on the House resolution there. And then number 3, Israel and the United States will always be allies, basically no matter what. Like just no qualifications. Just Israel's strong ally of the United States strong ally of Israel. Bowman was one of 9 people to vote no on that resolution, and so AIPAC wants to jump in now and see if they can primary him. He had a primary challenge last time and won fairly comfortably. He, of course, beat Eliot Engel, who was the House Foreign Affairs Committee chairman and one of the most kind of outspoken advocates for the AIPAC hawkish line in Israel. So AIPAC has wanted to take him out, since he upset Eliot Engel in that primary. And I think what they were extremely bothered by is that Bowman beat Eliot Engel in a lot of, and I think you probably know this district fairly well, a lot of heavily Jewish precincts went for Bowman. And that is something that is scary to AIPAC politically. When the gap between not just what the American population generally thinks, but what the Jewish population in the United States thinks about AIPAC is so wide that they can't even hold the foreign affairs chair's seat against somebody who's at the time was kind of mildly critical of Israel. This is Jamal Bowman is he's somebody who No, he says he supports Israel. He supports Israel's right to exist. He just supports, human rights and dignity for Palestinians living under Israeli control. And that right there is too much for AIPAC.
The reality is that about 75% of the Jewish population agrees, if you were to believe polling, agrees with Bowman's position on this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Engel was also, uniquely sort of like asleep at the wheel.
Yes.
I think at one point, like he was caught on tape as saying like, at some, I can't remember what the event was.
There was a Black Lives Matter rally.
Right.
This happened at the height of the George Floyd protests. And he's like, can I please speak? Can I please speak? And they're like, no, because there's so many politicians here. We can't have everybody speak. He's like, look, if I didn't have a primary, I wouldn't be asking to speak.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even be here if I didn't have a primary.
I wouldn't even be here. It was a hot mic. I remember that. That was amazing.
And it's on like New York One. And like, yeah, I wouldn't even be here if I didn't have a primary.
Right.
This is, I think, there's a couple of things, involved in that dynamic. One, the really intense sort of blind, if you will, unconditional support of Israel comes more now, I think, from the Christian Zionist community than it does from broadly the Jewish community. Because the Jewish community is, on a whole, far more willing to be critical of Israel's policies, at the least. And so you start to see, this is where, the Republicans are, why they are so vehemently supportive of Israel. The other thing that's sort of fascinating is that this notion of equating, this is what Trump did, right? And frankly, Bobby Kennedy did at his hearing yesterday, equating lack of anti-Semitism or support for Jews with support for Israel is sort of fascinating.
Right. Yes. And you see a ton of it on the right now. And I think because so much of the base for this on the right is these Christian Zionists, that allows so much genuine, real anti-Semitism to become also part of the conversation. That's why you can have, who's that white supremacist, Nick Fuentes?
Oh, yeah.
That spoke recently, like practically celebrating the Holocaust at a fairly mainstream kind of Republican event. You got Trump saying like outwardly anti-Semitic things, but then they say, well, I support Israel. So that's sort of like my get out of anti-Semitism card free. They feel like they can just say whatever they want because they so strongly support whatever Israel does unconditionally. It's kind of the reverse of saying that any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitism. Kind of the flip side of that is, any anti-Semitism is fine as long as you're supportive of the most far-right government in Israel, no matter what it's doing.
And will you just remind us, the implications of AIPAC going at Jamal Bowman, the last cycle was scary for a couple of reasons, because what we saw, the AIPAC, and I can't remember the name of the group. The
DMFI?
Yes.
The Democratic Majority for Israel.
Exactly. Yeah. And they just had some event out in California. I saw they have been going into primaries and really targeting progressive challengers or incumbents. And I think they had a pretty good track record last time. They failed in terms of Summer Lee, but they did well with a couple other candidates.
Yeah.
Just recap that for us, but also the problem with their being successful in that, and also speak to who's funding them. The problem with their success isn't even limited to those particular races, but rather it's almost created a blueprint or a template for attacking progressives.
Yeah. And so, right, they beat Nida Alam in North Carolina, spent millions against her, beat Erica Smith, spent millions in North Carolina, spent like $7 million beating Donna Edwards in suburban Washington and Maryland. And then, like you said, a number of other candidates kind of either walked or sprinted away from previously held positions in support of Palestinian rights. You had Maxwell Frost down in Orlando, who went from a supporter of BDS to calling BDS racist within like 6 months or something, hoping that this AIPAC and DMFI money wouldn't flood into the race. I interviewed his challenger who had been endorsed by AIPAC, and he's like, "Where's all the AIPAC money? I thought I was going to get all this AIPAC money." He'd gone to two AIPAC trips as a Florida state senator on AIPAC's dime, and didn't come in because he had kind of assuaged them. But in order to assuage them, a lot of these progressives also have to kind of back away from the general kind of progressive agenda, because Medicare for all, Green New Deal, support for Bernie Sanders, those kinds of things have been lumped in with, oh, well, then you're probably supportive of Palestinian rights too.
That's how AIPAC is going to try to, that's their next the new frontier, which is that if that divide is becoming more pronounced that you describe, Ryan, about the way that Jewish people are voting in districts that are, traditionally more heavily Jewish, and there's that schism between what AIPAC is promoting and how that population is going to be voting in a primary, then they have to put dark money into groups that are going to attack them on other issues like Medicare for all, Green New Deal, that would also have a high degree of correlation with also support for Palestinian rights.
And sometimes they'll even lie about that from the reverse angle. They spent a couple $1 million to beat Nina Turner in that special election in Ohio, and they were sending out mailers saying that she opposed a $15 minimum wage because she had voted no on the DNC platform, because she had tried to get the wage higher and had other problems with the platform. So they're like, Nina Turner voted against universal health care and against a $15 wage. And then in other places, they'll call her crazy and on and on. Yeah, but none of the ads ever focus on Israel-Palestine, ever.
And also we should say that I think part of it is that where their funding comes from, that may be part of the sort of strings attached to the funding.
It's it's private equity, hedge fund, other super wealthy money that is hostile to the general progressive agenda. They don't want higher taxes. They don't want Medicare for all. They don't want a Green New Deal. So, if you can funnel it through this, then it's effective.
And the problem with their success is, again, not just the candidates that they take out, but also that it's sort of like, what do you call it? It's the proof of concept.
Mm-hmm.
And so to lose in this fight with Jamal Bowman is going to be a big fight, it seems to me, because if you can show the limits of the value of their money, it's going to be harder for them to go back to these people and get more money, because as wealthy as these people are, they don't want to go out and spend money and not get their results. Right.
That's right. And AIPAC has been very good at creating fear around them coming into races. In the 1980s, that's how they basically set the template for this model that we're going to take out. We have the power to take you out. And so we don't have to spend money. We would prefer not to spend money, but
we discipline you with the
Yeah.
idea that we might do it. And that's the way that it happens. I mean, that's the sort of I think the part of the calculation that people don't fully understand when we talk about money in politics. It's also, and I think, Sheldon Whitehouse, sort of explained this to me years and years ago. He's like the other, or maybe it was Franken actually, would talk about the fear is not just that someone's going to spend money for your opponent, that they're going to come in and deploy money against you. And so you're part of what changes your sort of public pronouncements are to avoid that thing. Someone on the IM just asked why House resolutions matter. It's almost exclusively about elections. I mean, almost, right? In this instance, so that they can go out and say, Jamal Bowman voted against this. I mean, that's why the Republicans, when they control the House, they're, and Democrats do this too, not as effectively, I would argue, in sort of putting up sort of wedge issue resolutions.
Yeah, and it's a signal of power. And it's similar to the Iron Dome vote. If you remember that Iron Dome vote, which Bowman was criticized by the left for being on the wrong side. I voted for the Iron Dome funding. That funding was never intended to be enacted. It wasn't going to go through the Senate. It was just a symbolic vote. They already had billion plus dollars. Like
Right.
they didn't need another $1 billion. It was, and that's why they picked that round number of $1 billion for the Iron Dome to dare people to vote against it. And then if they vote against it, then use that against them. But it was just, and Hoyer said out loud, like that the Israeli foreign minister wanted a vote to show the fealty of the U.S. Congress to Israel on these issues. Because at the time, I forget exactly what was going on. There was, there's a controversy every couple months about something that somebody said. And so they wanted to respond to that with this vote on the House floor to show that the House stands firmly with Israel. And so they picked the Iron Dome. But yeah, it's symbolic stuff rather than anything that's getting written into law.
I still contend that, but largely it has to do with, I think, the efficacy of this money, that, we are 10 to 15 years out where the Democratic Party is far more likely to make support of Israel, financial support, conditioned in some respect. But this money coming in really has changed the calculation in a lot of ways, I think. And we've seen this, guys like Fetterman also, I think.
Fetterman let DMFI edit his position because he was facing, what was his name? Connor Lamb, very credible center-left establishment guy that with a couple $1 million can potentially win that primary. Connor Lamb was publicly begging for super PACs, if you remember, to come in. Like they were putting out memos saying like, we can win this, but we need a super PAC. If you're a super PAC, come on in. And so Fetterman, made the calculation that said, what is my position on aid, military aid and conditioning, or and Mark Mellman told, I believe it was Jewish Insider in an interview, that his team was very generous and allowed us to make edits, and they accepted our edits, and so we didn't spend money against them.
And to be clear, the calculation here, and this is like sort of the ugly part of politics, and I guess people can just sort of decide for themselves as to what the value is. But the calculation for a guy like Fetterman is like, my vote is not going to prevent this from happening.
Right.
And that's why, these votes by Jamal Bowman and those other 8 House people who voted against it, it's a pretty brave thing to do politically, because you're not going to get any material benefit out of it. The resolution itself wouldn't be binding in any real way whatsoever. It is, and you are theoretically, Jabal Bowman gets voted out. We have one less vote for Medicare for all.
Yeah, and on top of that, the hardcore kind of people who for them this is a single issue are probably not going to end up supporting him anyway, even though he voted against this resolution because of his Iron Dome vote. So, in some ways, it is extra brave because of that, because there's very little upside on the other side. And he said in an interview with me that ahead of that Iron Dome vote, he heard tons from people who wanted him to vote yes in his district, and 0 from people who wanted him to vote no. So people on Twitter are asking a lot to do something that's could be politically damaging to you, despite the fact that there's no grassroots organizing going on to kind of support you if you do it.
And to be clear, from the perspective of a voter, you also got to be aware that it's not just a question of political damage. It is a damage that is to these other issues that you may or may not care about. Is really the point. All right, let's move on. I want to briefly talk about this, just briefly get your speculation on this, and then let's talk about the lab leak, because you guys, you wrote a piece the other day about the Republicans accidentally releasing information on the lab leak, and you guys have been on that beat for a bit, and I'm curious about it. But let's just first, before you came on, the Judge Cannon pushed. We now have the criminal trial of his stolen documents case taking place in May of 2024. This is in contrast to, I think, the Bragg one, which is in 2025. And is the Bragg one in 2025? Is that it? Do I have that right?
Sound right?
nevertheless,
Well, there's so many better ones. Just let that one go.
I know.
Wait, no, the Bragg one is in 2024. The Bragg one's in March 2024.
Oh, it's in March 2024.
If I'm not mistaken, or February.
March 25th, 24.
Okay.
Okay. But the stolen documents one is a serious one that could actually send him to prison. I think the Bragg one may be one that he could
I don't think there's any prison
fine. Yeah,
associated
exactly.
with that. Yeah.
What do you? I mean, aside from the fact that there's obviously going to be attempts, and I imagine they might be successful to push it from May 2024. But I mean, this has been the big question, right? Like I have like two series of questions when people ask me who I think is going to win the election. Who's alive on November 6th of the candidates?
Key question.
And is Trump literally in prison at the time? But it doesn't seem like any of these cases, and this is a political question aside from like, yes, I think we should hold people accountable. And I think Trump should be in prison. But what are the implications of it? Or do you think there are any?
Well, so if you think about the Theranos lady, what was the gap between her conviction and her going to prison? Like long,
I mean,
right?
enough for her to have a kid, right? During that
and
time.
Also to like develop relationships with journalists who
Amy Chozick, spending some quality time with Amy Chozick.
Right.
So what could also happen? Let's say, first of all, I suspect it gets delayed, but let's say it actually comes off in May. Let's say he gets convicted because I mean. He did the stuff. And I think even like
he's admitted it in like 14 different venues.
And the American people are I much prefer going after him over insurrection than this kind of thing. But the American people, I think, still have a lot of respect for the idea of the jury. And I think even Trump supporters, if they got on the jury and just looked at the evidence, you could be like, yeah, okay. I mean, he did this stuff. And so let's say he does get convicted. Then you ask for bail on appeal,
right?
While you're awaiting sentencing. So you're out while you're awaiting sentencing, and you can also be out while you have live appeals, as long as you can keep the sentencing, keep punting it backwards. So I could imagine a world where even if he gets convicted, the sentencing and the appeal process keeps him free past the election.
And then he starts the new tradition of inaugural day pardons,
or he loses and goes to prison.
Right. Flies to whatever country he has tried to figure out where he could get asylum.
Yeah,
wouldn't
where
that
would
be
he
amazing?
go? Yeah.
Wouldn't that be amazing if he actually fled the country and sought asylum?
Well, there's
Orban
Trump
or
Tower at Kazakhstan. There's Trump Towers all over the place.
Saudi Arabia, I mean, or whatever.
It's true. He could go. He could go
to Qatar, where he's building that golf course, and that's rife with corruption. I mean, he's got some really shady friends.
Is it unlikely that he hasn't sort of prepared for something like that?
I would think. I'm sure. He's such a.
Crazy person
who games things out all the time and has just crazy ideas that I'm sure he and Roger Stone or whoever.
There's got to be some bunker in some country that they've built where they're going to hide out before they can. I mean, but that should be interesting. All right, let's get to this lab leak thing. This has become. It's a strange story. To me, insofar as more like how it's being utilized than the story itself. I mean, as far as I know, there has been up until at least fairly recently, no real evidence that there was a lab leak. It doesn't seem implausible in any way, but there hasn't been substantial evidence of a lab leak. Am I right or wrong about that?
Everything is just circumstantial. Like that's right. There's no like smoking gun. There's no kind of mutation within COVID-19 that proves engineering or proves a lab, because and this comes up
It doesn't
a lot.
necessarily. I mean, if it's a lab leak, it doesn't necessarily have to be engineered either, does it?
Exactly. And so that comes up a ton in these new messages that the Republicans accidentally leaked that say all of this could be the product of natural evolution, but that natural evolution may have been hastened in a lab. In other words, you culture these viruses, you run them through basically mice over and over and over again, and you rapidly, rather than just allowing
That's the so-called gain of function.
It doesn't necessarily have to be gain of function.
Oh, I see. Okay, it's just could be just natural evolution, right? In fact, those are distinct things. Now this is coming back to me that one thing is sort of like we have this virus. Let's get a sense of how it's going to mutate in the future, so that we can develop
put it through 10,000 mutations.
We can develop vaccines so that if it goes out into the wild and becomes a pandemic, we'll have a notion of where it's going, so that we understand how this evolution works on some level.
That's right. And so in these messages, you keep having these scientists who, in the very beginning, are leaning toward lab escape, which it eventually
Who are these scientists? Tell us tell us that. Who are these scientists?
So you've got a crew of them. So the lead ones who go on to write this proximal origins paper, the paper that then Fauci cites in the White House, saying like it was natural origin, and these scientists have just done that. Lead author on that is a guy named Dr. Christian Anderson. You also have Bob Gary from Tulane, Andrew Rambeau, and Eddie Holmes.
So these aren't government scientists. They're just a group of scientists who are in a network with each other. And when did they write this paper? When did they do this research?
So they had their conference call with Francis Collins, the head of the NIH, and Fauci on February 1st. And on that conference call, they're all leaning lab leak. Something happened on that call that after that call, they sat down and wrote a first draft of the article that ended up being published in Nature Medicine. Nature actually rejected it. It ends up getting published in Nature Medicine as a preprint February, I think, 17th, and then as an actual article on March 17th, coming to the opposite conclusion that they had come to on the phone call. Conclusion is the wrong word, where they're leaning.
Right.
They said, well, we got some new data over that short amount of time, and that's why we changed our minds. What the new messages show is that well into the spring, they were still privately saying that they absolutely could not rule out a lab, and that a lot of them still thought a lab was actually more likely. And so there is the question, the empirical question of COVID's origin, which we're not really any closer to. But there's also the question of how did we set a narrative that became so partisan that for the first year or year and a half or so, everybody just kind of believed that science had proven that this was this was natural.
Let me ask you that though, because I mean, didn't they have that multi-year long report by what? It was the director of national intelligence, or the report that came out in late June, which essentially said that both theories are plausible, but the weight of the evidence was much more on the zoonosis theory, and they went through some of the kind of not allegations, but questions, including in November, the researchers having symptoms that could be associated with COVID, but could also be associated with cold or allergies or flu-like symptoms, that kind of thing. And like my gut feeling is that there's very little that in Washington there's consensus about, but hawkishness towards China is 100% bipartisan in a certain sense. So if there was evidence that was supporting the lab leak theory, my guess is that the intelligence report would be more willing to lend credence to that, given Washington's proclivities, as opposed to purely giving lip service to it in the report, and then the rest of the report being basically centered around the zoonosis theory.
But, there was a statute that required them to release, to declassify all information around the lab leak related to Wuhan. All the information they had related to Wuhan. The statute explicitly said we want the names of the researchers. We want what you know about date of onset. And it appeared that the people writing the statute who have been doing this investigation have access to classified information, and so know that they have these names. The Wall Street Journal has reported their names, and they wanted more details on this, and they just ignored the law and just said, yeah, it's true actually that there were some lab workers who got sick in the fall. Might have been COVID, might not have been COVID, and we're not going to tell you anything more. We're not going to tell you their names. The Wall Street Journal's reporting is that one of them was a top researcher, kind of the top guy who there are videos and photos of him doing extremely unsafe work in conditions that where virologists who are responsible look at that and are like, oh my God, that's horrifying. What are you doing? And the fact that you have a camera like recording you doing this. And then we have the Wall Street Journal saying that they got sick. You have a law saying, tell us these people's names. And instead they respond to the law by saying, yes, some people got sick, but they also had some non-COVID symptoms, which is what I can't even think of what a non-COVID symptom is. COVID is such a wild across the spectrum kind of illness. So I'm not sure that whoever put out that report wanted to kind of slam the lab there. I think for whatever reason, they decided to put it out that way. The FBI was the FBI and the Department of Energy. So FBI has, enormous amounts of kind of resources at its disposal, and the Energy Department has the most scientists at its disposal. They both think, lab escape is more likely. Then you have others who say that zoonosis is
right.
Is
we
more,
should say the FBI
likely.
one and the Department of Energy, I think, specifically said low confidence. But I mean, I don't know really what that
I think
means.
one of them was medium confidence. But then the question is, if that's the case, why for a year and a half were we led to believe that this was not an open question? And so that's why it's important to understand what happened on this conference call and what these scientists believed, because as you mentioned, there are scientists, but they're government funded scientists. But
I guess I would push back on the notion that it was in any way presented as something that was a closed case, because I just felt that, I think a majority of Americans believe the lab leak theory.
Well, they do now.
Yeah, but there's all the evidence that's cited is circumstantial, and so I think that would probably flies in the face, I guess, of the notion that it was presented as a open and shut case. I don't remember that being the case.
If you speculated about the question of whether or not there may have been a lab escape as the origin of COVID on Facebook for close to 2 years, you would have your account taken down. Twitter wouldn't nuke your account, but was extremely restrictive on what you could say around that question. And that was coming from the NIH and coming from Fauci, who Fauci called it a conspiracy theory. And he pointed to this proximal origin paper to say that it was a conspiracy theory, when in fact they knew that it was very much an open question. And what drives me insane about this is because the reason I care so much about this is that Fauci is one of the most kind of aggressive supporters of gain of function research in the virology community. He gave this interview, I think 2012 or 2014, to an Australian newspaper where he was complaining about Obama, very rightly, putting a pause on gain of function research. And he was asked, what about the cost benefits here? Aren't you worried about the costs? And he said, this research is so valuable that I think it is worth the risk of a pandemic in order to go forward with this research. He also knew that he was funding some of this risky research through the NIH and through the NIAID at the Wuhan lab. Another guy who was on that call is this guy, Ron Fouchier, who's also close to virologist. Who's close to Fauci, who did this extraordinarily controversial research, gain of function research with bird flu, where he made bird flu, he basically turned it into something that could be transmissible by air to humans. And the rest of the virology community was like, dude, what are you doing?
Right. What's the value of that?
And there's this ideological cowboy component in the virology community that was very nervous that this was going to lead to some type of restrictions on gain of function research if people started looking too closely at this stuff. And as I've looked a lot more closely at this, and my colleague Mara Fissendahl over at the Intercept has done a lot of reporting about other lab accidents. Lab accidents happen, and it only has to happen once for the virus to get out and to create something cataclysmic that makes that we look back on this with nostalgia. And so that's what bothers me so much about the shutting down of the conversation around it, because it then lets people off the hook who have this ideological kind of drive to do this risky research that a lot of people just don't think actually is that useful. I think I have another story coming out. Let me find this good Christian Anderson quote on it. So this is from February. In February, in his messages, Christian Anderson is very nervous that Fauci is going to think that he's a, quote, crackpot who's opposed to gain of function research. Meanwhile, Anderson had an $8.9 million grant application sitting on Fauci's desk, and he's sharing his thoughts in a Slack message on gain of function research. He says, "I'm all for gain of function experiments. I think they're really important." Then he puts an asterisk in his Slack message. And he says, "I have evolved a bit on this point. Said, I used to think they're really important, but I'm actually not so sure anymore. I thought it was really important that we understood whether, for example, avian influenza could be transmissible between humans, and importantly, which steps and how many would need to be involved. But honestly, I'm not sure that type of knowledge is at all actionable, while, of course, being exceptionally dangerous. It only takes one mistake." And that's my problem with it, because they'll say, we need all this information, and that's why we need to do this risky research.
Right, but where's the cost-benefit analysis?
And also, what can you do with this information? Anderson's right. The Wuhan lab, the goal of the Wuhan lab was to detect and prevent future pandemics. At a bare minimum, even if you believe the zoonosis theory, a pandemic broke out a mile from it, and they didn't prevent it. So
whatever happened to the around that time, there was reporting as to both the diminishment of pandemic preparedness on a cabinet level under Trump, and diminishment of American observation in and around Wuhan, and I would imagine other areas in China. That was all cut. Do you remember any of that? Because it seems to have sort of that gone into the ether.
That was cut, and I think Fauci was able to use. Fauci, has been in the government for decades and was able to use kind of the new administration being less interested in gain of function research to kind of restart a lot of the funding that Obama, in the wake of the Ebola outbreak, had very smartly paused, and which I don't think Obama doesn't get enough credit for that. Like he looked at both sides of the issue and came down and said, you know what, this is too risky. This is the benefit that we could potentially get out of this is totally theoretical. You're not telling me we can make viruses. I mean, we can make vaccines. Like we don't actually need to know this, and the cost is very clear. And he shut that down. And so then that opened back up, and then you have Trump getting completely hostile with China constantly, and then shutting down pandemic preparedness. They had just zero plan.
So what is the motivation of the Republicans on this committee to not have released this information as opposed to accidentally releasing it? And I should also say, I just want to get back, in terms of like the Facebook stuff, it seems to me, and I really don't know about, I'm not even on Facebook really in any meaningful way. So I'm not really familiar with any of this.
I don't think anyone really is anymore.
When they censored that stuff, there's a difference, seems to me, between censoring, like, is this conclusive? Is this an open question, versus it's a lab leak based upon non-evidence, right? Because we still are, it seems to me, in an area where there is no evidence of a lab leak. We don't have a conclusive answer, but to the extent that there is evidence, and I wouldn't say there's a preponderance of evidence, but there's certainly a majority. I mean, to the extent that there is evidence, it's all on the zoolistic. I can't even know the word. Zoonotic.
Oh, did I say it wrong?
No,
you had it right.
You said it
okay,
right.
okay.
I just I don't, after the third syllable, I don't hear anything.
Well, the evidence against it, though, is that it appears that it was already circulating in Wuhan before this outbreak. Like all of
is that true though? Is there evidence of that?
You had the what games you had, like international games in October in Wuhan, and you had a bunch of athletes go home with COVID, and so
did they go home with COVID in October?
I mean, how does it get to Italy? Yeah, you have a lot of reports of athletes going home with COVID. The original, like, the case keeps getting pushed back. So that part is problematic. Like the timeline of the Wuhan market. Wuhan market appears to be more of a super spreader. That doesn't mean it's a lab. It could have been somewhere else. But they also have traced every single animal sold at that wet market all the way back to their farms. They've slaughtered an ungodly number of animals, searching
who's
for
they?
The
Chinese?
The Chinese, yeah. In collaboration with the WHO, because they're happy to collaborate in attempts to prove that it was a natural origin, and so there has been real research done in trying to find the intermediate species, and the idea that, let's say it's a raccoon dog or whatever, like the idea that a raccoon dog could have then given it to humans in the market, but then you can't find any other raccoon dog anywhere ever who's had it, is evidence that you need to keep hunting until you find something. But they, like I said, they've slaughtered animals all across the area and haven't found one yet.
All right. So, but fair enough. But we still haven't said evidence of a lab leak, right? I mean, we're there. I mean, I again, I'm agnostic, really, about this, and I think more importantly, we need more controls, regardless. I mean, it doesn't. It that to me.
I mean,
seems...
the best for people who aren't following it, the best evidence that you would have is this circumstantial evidence that there was a grant application made to DARPA to create a virus that would basically have been able to create a SARS-CoV-2, which was not funded, which the EcoHealth Alliance, the organizations that applied for it, says they didn't do the research, but they don't know. Like, they don't have full access to the Wuhan lab. Once they had, usually you do some of the research, ahead of a grant application. And they also had, we know, the Wuhan lab has financing that is independent of the NIH. It's not just the NIH that's funding this lab. So they could have done that work. There's also this very COVID close 2012 Mayan virus that was being researched on in the lab. And it doesn't have to have been gain of function. It could have just been normal virological research that just slipped out. Probably also a good idea not to have these labs in a city of 20 million people.
Well,
just in general, even if it didn't come from the lab.
I guess that cuts both ways, right? I mean, because my understanding is that these labs exist all around the biggest cities in China, specifically because you want some close proximity to where a pandemic may take place. I'm not, I don't know. I don't know about the theory about that. So with all that said, what is happening? Is there any sort of like reassertion of the controls that existed prior to Trump's administration?
The House passed, and maybe it'll get through the Senate as part of the NDAA, restrictions on, in particular, the Wuhan lab and EcoHealth Alliance, and some other foreign funding of labs. But it really has to be an international convention, because, okay, you stop one lab from doing this risky research, you can just do it somewhere else. And it's not as if it leaks out of a lab in Sudan, that it can't ever get over to the United States or anywhere else. So there hasn't been a whole lot of movement in that direction, and part of it, it's just such a partisan. It's become caught up in it. It should be. You would think it'd be the kind of thing that Democrats would be supportive of, because it's government regulation for public safety. It's weird that it's kind of Republicans leading the way on that, and they're not serious about it. So therefore, it's not going to become
is
a
that
holistic policy.
Why did those Slack thing, like the piece that you wrote outlines how these scientists, despite having put out a paper where their speculation was that it was
Natural.
Zoonotic, yes, natural versus a lab leak, but they were still talking about the lab leak in private. Why did that leak out? Why didn't the Republicans?
And so this is a good tip if you're ever producing a report. And we had one of our tech guys had actually written a story on this a couple of years ago that they clearly didn't read. If you're making a Word document and you crop an image, you then have to take extra steps when you kind of produce your final document, or else you can, if you're smart and know how to do it, I had to get help. You click on the image and it gives you the entire image.
You can revert back to the original thing. Like it almost works on your iPhone in the same way. If you crop an image, there's still the information that is outside the crop. Well, I get that, but what I don't understand is like why weren't they?
Yeah, idiots. It's like
no.
Yeah,
I'm not asking why they made the mistake that made it possible to leak.
No. Why didn't they release it like during the hearing when they had the guys right in front of them?
That's my thing is like they're desperate to attack Biden on China. If this, I think, information was as revelatory, my guess is that they would have leaked it on purpose or used it to a political benefit.
I think that they were holding it for some grand finale.
Effect.
Yeah. And that maybe they were lining up it with Fox News or somebody who was going to do like a definitive like piece. I don't think their preference was that it like
comes out and
guy on Twitter and then a guy on the Intercept.
How did you know to do that? Do you always like everyone? No. See a picture now.
I wish I could remember his Twitter handle now, but a guy on Twitter just knew how to do that, and that night was like going through the PDF and was tweeting out some of it, and so I saw his thread and flagged it for our IT guy, or one who was like, oh wow, they didn't read our story on this, and he was very quickly able to export everything and get it into a zip file, which was great because then quickly after that Republicans took it back down, but now it's out. Since then they seem to have leaked all of it now to Taibbi and Schellenberger, like even more than they had accidentally leaked, because the only things that we got were stuff where they had cropped something else, but there's a lot of pages where they didn't crop anything, so we didn't get those.
So they gave the rest of the story to Schellenberger and Taibbi.
What it looks like, yeah. And maybe they were planning on giving them all of it at some point.
Why don't you give it to the Wall Street Journal?
Maybe they were. Like if I were them, I'd give it to the Wall Street Journal. Like that's your most respectable kind of.
Well, it's also like the Substacks. Like you're gonna like if it's really, I mean, presumably there's some element of this is in the public interest from their perspective, and you would think you'd want it widely disseminated as opposed to like I don't know if Schellenberger has a Substack or just a Twitter feed.
It's not going to break through in the same way that
Substack
the journal does it. Yeah.
Well, Ryan Grimm, interesting. Appreciate you coming on and talking about that piece, among other things. I'm sure it's going to generate a little bit of controversy around here, but it's interesting.
People should ask themselves why. Like why are they partisan about this?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that I don't think it's partisan, but I do appreciate whenever you come on, you're my favorite person to disagree with because it's always the most good faith disagreements. So much appreciated about that, Ryan.
Yeah. And I think, someone made a point on here that that in the context when this began, when the theory of the lab leak was considered to be misinformation, and still we're 2 years out, 3 years out. We still have no evidence of a lab leak. It's possible. I mean, we also, it's more possible, it seems to me, than aliens coming down and generating this virus. Definitely more possible. We don't necessarily have evidence. any more evidence of that happening.
And you see messages from these scientists early on that say that if this was a lab leak, there will never be evidence. Like there just won't be.
And
so therefore, let's avoid the fact that it might have been.
Well, I mean, if that's the case,
the virus is
then it becomes more of a public policy question. If we can never resolve this issue in that environment that was taking place, where you're having people, being beat up because they were, of, some Asian descent. I mean, and it was being used as a jumping off point of it, because if it was a question of a lab leak, as opposed to this has been developed as a bioweapon, let's say, which is
kind of virus.
Yeah.
The Wuhan, what was he calling it? Kung
Wuhan flu.
Trump called it Kung flu at one point.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I can understand why, in the absence of evidence, there would be some sense of this is a public policy question. I mean, even the government didn't do this. Facebook did it, and it was their sort of forward, public policy. That I think that explanation is not that hard for me to understand. That people have that perspective on it.
Right, but also because they had that paper in Nature Medicine that they could point to.
Say that it
was natural. You had I understand, that's where I was, because I read that paper and I'm like, oh, these guys know this more than I know it. They say this.
It's not I mean, to be fair, it's also not the only paper, right? There's 4 or 5
paper.
What's that?
It was the key paper. Yeah.
At that time.
Yeah.
All right. Fair enough. Ryan Grimm, I'm glad you're unrepentant.
That's right. Always. Never repent.
Appreciate your time.
You got it.
Thanks, Ryan.
All right, folks. We're running a little bit late. We got Matthew Film Guy. We got to take a quick break, and we'll come back with Matthew Film Guy.
I will.
Matthew, please recommend me a movie to stream.
Say it again.
Matthew, Film Guy.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Matthew Film. Oh, stop it! You're not. What is that? What are you drinking there? Yeah, Jazz Daredevil.
Contractually obligated. No. Contractually obligated.
Matthew Film Guy, welcome back. Emma will rejoin us in just a moment. What's going? What you have a different? I don't know. You look a little different. I don't know. Is your beard grown out?
I mean,
did you have your chest bleached? What's going on here? I can't tell what's going on.
I don't have to have my chest bleached. I'm naturally this.
I was going to say, like, is that what have you been outside in the past year? What's going on?
What's outside? I'm an editor, Sam. I'm a film guy. Dark rooms are my natural habitat. I don't, unless I have like a sun lamp, maybe.
Now, let's just start with this. As you know, and I've seen the lewd pictures you've been producing on Twitter, apparently, or Instagram. I'm not sure where you're posting these things. Of me, with a union sign.
Oh yes.
But what this is impacting? I mean, this is the writer's strike, to some extent impacts production. Thank you. There you go. The writer's strike to some extent impacts production, but
big extent.
The actor's strike really, really shuts it down definitively, right? I mean, people can write stuff and then it exists, and then you could be producing stuff, theoretically months, years theoretically after it, and then editing. But how has this impacted you, the strike?
Well, I think I maybe even mentioned it by the time we had our last talk. They were already, even by last fall, my agents were saying, like, we're predicting a slowdown. People are nervous about starting a new production because of the looming possibility, first of the writers, then of the actors. So as far as I'm concerned, I've been in a strike mode for 6-8 months almost. There have been some projects that have come to me, one that just didn't seem right for me, and another one that is the second project by a director I've worked with before that had to get pushed to the fall, so it's coming. But as far as I'm concerned, the actors joining the writers is only a good thing, just to accelerate it, push them as hard as they can. Although we'll see, their whole strategy is don't negotiate, starve them out, etc. So I'm bearing down for the long haul here. Although I do hear some whispers of certain projects getting waivers if they are not connected in any way to the AMPTP.
My understanding is that there's been about 5 or 10, decent sized independent films that have been waivered.
The last article I read said 39 projects got it and more are being asked.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. But they'd have to be both agreeing to the terms of that they're asking in the strike, so a bump in pay and all this other kind of changes, and they'd have to not have any connection to the producers group that is leading the strike. So it's not going to apply to everybody.
Independent, like A24, right. I saw in the article, yep. But other smaller studios too.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I don't know. I don't have the details. I saw that number 39 with more, probably in the same article you read. So I don't know if this project I'm waiting to hear from is going to qualify for that, or they're hoping that it goes away. I'm not even really counting on it. I've fallen back on some of my other income streams, corporate video, and of course teaching my class, which everybody is free to join. But for the most part right now, I am not expecting and preparing for this to go on for quite a while.
Interesting. And I mean, what do you think? I mean, there's no way to know, I guess, any of us, how long this is going to go on, but it is, I mean, there's a very interesting dynamic here where the streamers do not want, and I just be clear, like this is a lot of it. I mean, they're talking about AI, but a lot of it has to do with residuals. Once the show goes on to a streaming platform, the residuals dry up, essentially.
And basically the structure is there are no residuals in that same way. It doesn't even work out that way.
I think it's like one time, but it's like literally pennies. And
yeah,
I mean, I'm talking literally pennies. Like I've gotten checks for 53 cents, and whatnot. But there is still value that is coming to these streamers, obviously, and the producers, obviously. And for actors, like, these residuals are super important. I mean, it's almost like, almost like what they do smoothing for electric bills or something like that, where it allows,
level payment plan.
Yeah. I mean, the idea is that it allows people who may make a lot of money in a day, but those days are far and few between. And one of the issues is the streamers do not want to give up the information about viewership on particular shows, which has traditionally been, sort of it's suggested as one mechanism to provide residuals. Like if this thing is bringing you a lot of value. And I think part of that is because they are nervous that their investor, that the stock market will see that their numbers, they don't have many people watching anything in particular. And I mean, my understanding is like, for instance, Girls, just as an example, and this is on HBO, not a classic streamer, but sort of almost like the pioneer for it. Girls never got huge numbers, but it got so much attention that it kept HBO on, either people subscribing to HBO or, a cable company's carrying it and obviously and selling the subscriptions. And that is like, that's why winning Emmys for a show is more important sometimes on streaming or whatever it is, or an Oscar than the actual viewership, because it brings subscribers to the platform. And that's sort of the value there. And they're afraid that if people find out like, oh, you're getting the same numbers as like maybe a very popular YouTube channel, well, I'm going to sell the stock because I don't see how this is going to make money in the future or whatnot. And in some ways it may be legitimately founded, but unfounded. It doesn't impact the revenue, to be clear, but the CEOs and the C-suite people rely on the stock price to get their money. Again, this is that classic problem of them running basically a cottage industry based on the stock market, not even based on the health of the company necessarily.
Isn't that funny? It all is coming down to this financialization of society. It's affected every single sector. It ruined the music business. It's ruining politics, and this is just another front line, basically. So it's going to be very interesting to me to see how it shakes out, because if it does result in atomization and less verticalization and more independent streamers and more independent production companies, I'll be happy about it.
Right.
But it remains to be seen if there's going to be any viable outcome that doesn't serve the power that actually exists.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see.
Obviously my leftist sort of example or hope would be that there'd be some sort of government streaming service, an arts program, a kind of public arts streaming channel that could at least be an outlet or a competitor to the profit motive version of arts. But that's obviously a pipe dream that, it would take a radically different consciousness of the population to actually make viable. But it seems to me that there's not going to be any great outcome to this. Is it on a labor issue? Should I hope for the profit participation in these corporate products by the people making them? Absolutely. That's just a sort of a basic sort of labor rights issue. But in terms of what works better to make better films, better content, and not just keep pumping out more, no offense, Emma, reality TV show crap to fill the airwaves, I don't have any real hope that this is going to help that in any way. But I
do both. I support both. I support the crap and the not crap. All right.
Matt,
I understand.
I've always felt like this, like the solution for this problem in entertainment is the same, or like film is the same in music, is the same in journalism, is that we need to decommodify essentials, right? Like if all of a sudden we weren't concerned about how we're going to pay for healthcare or housing or all these sorts of things, if that stuff is just like taken as a given, then people's like your opportunity, you don't need to crunch to like just do whatever's going to bring in the most revenue. You can like take your time on things.
And also as a pursuit, you don't have to make commercial products.
Yeah.
That, or I should say, as commercial of products, particularly in an era where like, you could make a movie and have it on your YouTube channel and set it up and make enough if to maybe support a decent level of living as an artist in the event that you had some of your essentials decommodified.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it has a lot of tendrils in a lot of areas, and and as far as me and my film guy thing goes, it's like I still hold out the hope that if this does crater the sort of machine of product based filmmaking, I hope that it leaves a space for people to explore what exists in the world of films today, right? Like right now, not a lot of new stuff is coming out, and maybe people will turn to something like the Criterion Channel or to Mubi or some of these other places that they can see things that they maybe wouldn't have if they're just jonesing for the next episode of their favorite, viral show. Because it does also require, it's this weird feedback loop of the audiences respond to commercial products, so they make more commercial product, and then they say, well, that's all the audience wants is more of this crap, and they start to feed it to them. So at some point they got to get off the merry-go-round, and maybe it's tilting at windmills, but I still think that that's got to factor in a little bit too. So I'm putting one stone to right every day.
The Equimisc says the number of Amazon Prime Video viewers was 133.2 million in 2020, growing 10% to 146.5 million in 2021. In 2022, viewer numbers grew to 152.6. The story behind this, and I don't know if they are aware of this, Amazon beat Netflix to India and discounted their Prime membership there in India, and that's where I think a lot of this growth is coming. But again, we're not seeing actual viewership numbers. We're seeing subscriber numbers. The Amazon's not going to put out who actually views it. They refer to it as viewer number, but that's not, just because you have it doesn't mean you're watching it. But putting that aside, and that's the problem that Netflix has in terms of their profitability. And again, their revenue is huge. Their top executives are making literally $100 million, $200 million. But
I would do that job for 1 million.
But for those type of numbers, it is tied to the stock price. Right. And investors are not looking for revenue right now. They're looking for revenue in the future. Right. And if it comes out that, something like people aren't really watching us, then it goes down just because investors assume that's going to be a problem, because people are like, wait, as opposed to a business model, which is, oh, I own it and I watch it once a month and I still pay whatever it is.
It's the streaming bubble, basically.
Yes, exactly. And that bubble is going to burst soon. And I'm not convinced that they're not going to try and use the strike as an excuse for that.
Well, didn't you see this article about the whole thing that Netflix just said, like, if you share your account, you got to pay $8. Everybody just did it. So they didn't lose, they gained more subscribers. So it doesn't seem to me that they're holding, that they're worried about that happening.
Well, I think it's a stock thing. That's it. It's bottom line.
Yeah, but if you can point to, like, we just robbed another $8 from everybody, and they were like, okay, that seems to.
Well, the problem with the stock market is they're not interested in, you just got the extra $8, what your revenue is. It's like, okay, now what's left?
Right. The next thing.
If you've lost in India, what's next?
Yeah.
And
you're just
that is the nature
same problem
of
everywhere.
That's the nature of the stock market. Because the stock has to keep going up.
Endless growth.
I mean, that's what the cottage industry business is.
The cancer of capitalist and endless growth, right, Emma?
Mm-hmm.
Plus, when you get paid in stock, your capital gains tax is lower, and so then you could make a difference of $20 million to you, and I guess then you can get every one of your sinks fur-lined in your house. All right, Matthew, let's get to. We have enough of this business stuff. Let's talk about.
Let's go from the business section to the movie section, shall we?
Yes. Barbie. Have you seen it?
Don't spoil it. Don't spoil it.
I haven't seen it. Look, I've met Greta Gerwig back in the early days when she was working with Joe Swanberg and seemed like the next big thing. And I'm a huge fan of the movie she co-directed with Joe Swanberg, Nights and Weekends. That's one of my favorite mumblecore movies. I have not seen any of the work that she's done since then. I just it's not compelling to me. I support her as a female filmmaker out there making a name in the boys club, and I'm behind her on that level. But I just personally don't have a real burning desire to see a movie made out of a Mattel toy. I mean, I did go see the G.I. Joe movie only because I was programmed as a young boy to see that.
So this is what I'm saying here, Matthew. Check your male perspective just slightly. Just
you
slightly.
talk out of both sides of your mouth.
I'm copping to being programmed, but this is just not my programming.
That's
so I can
fine.
resist the one, not the other.
I was a girl or tomboy. I never played with Barbies growing up, but it's cool to see a female indie film director at the helm of a movie that is not a freaking Marvel movie that people are excited about to go see in the theaters. I just want to say that.
On that level, I can't argue, but it's still like, it's like, Hillary Clinton becoming president. Like, okay, she's broken the glass ceiling so she can be the new murderer in chief. Okay, but it's not the same.
I heard there's a lot of great social commentary in this movie that I haven't spoiled myself yet, but
and I haven't seen it, so I
haven't seen it either. However, let's be clear. We all know what this is about. People make movies in Hollywood specifically based upon an ideological desire to turn everyone into cultural Marxists. Here is Fox's Laura Ingraham and Fox's Raymond Arroyo, who are outlining what the agenda is behind this huge so-called movie, or as we call it, propaganda.
Yeah.
Now, we've seen some enduring and beloved brands, Laura, destroyed this year. It seems Barbie is next. If you believe these reviews,
wait a second. What other brands have been destroyed?
Mr. Potato, the genderless potato head,
Bud Light, right?
Obviously,
Disney,
Target, Disney. We've lost some great ones, everybody.
All gone.
To the woke mind virus.
Our beloved brands.
The year of the brands.
I mean, without our brands, what are we even?
Well, let's get back to.
Are we just
Barbie,
animals
brand.
without brands?
Now, we've seen some enduring and beloved brands, Laura, destroyed this year. It seems Barbie is next. If you believe these reviews, the new Barbie movie takes America's favorite doll from Barbie to Harpy. The New York Post declares it lousy. Sarah Vine writes at the Daily Mail, it's a deeply anti-man movie, an extension of all the TikTok feminism that paints any form of masculinity as toxic and predatory. Every male character is either an idiot, a bigot, or a sad, rather pathetic loser. Laura, can you imagine if James Marigold had turned Indiana Jones into an anti-woman warrior, or that Super Mario Brothers movie was about how dumb women were? There would have been pickets in the theaters. People should react similarly here.
Well, they don't want real men. I mean, they want pajama boys who sit around waiting for the government to send them a check, as they get ready for their, Pilates class and their, leggings, and wait for the next,
that sounds
DoorDash order to come in. I mean, they don't real men are a threat to them.
I prefer Uber Eats.
Well, and this is insidious because feminists are taking over a doll they never really liked in the first place and using it as a Trojan horse to teach girls daddy is really a dummy or a domineering idiot.
You know what's weird is that they couldn't. So this movie was initially not a Greta Gerwig vehicle. It was, or maybe like Margot Robbie hadn't signed on. It was going to be Amy Schumer playing Barbie. Okay. That would have, I mean, I don't even know, like conservatives might have just evaporated, like a third of them just gone immediately, actually down to hell instead of not heaven. Like it's the leftovers or something.
It'd be self-immolating.
At least Margot Robbie looks like Barbie.
But that's the thing. So they recasted her. It's the whitest, like most. It looks exactly like Barbie. They could have done something even more subversive. I haven't seen it, and made it like someone like Amy Schumer, who's not a traditional Barbie body type. And yet they still find a way to be mad about it. Because I think like Gosling plays a himbo type. Ken is more of an accessory to Barbie than the main character.
But I mean, that's true to the brand.
Exactly.
I mean, it's not. People weren't going out. The brand is not Ken doll. In fact. I mean, I have not used this parlance in a long time, but when I was like, in my 20s or something, it would be disparaging to say like, guys, like a Ken doll. He just looks like he's
for exactly the
completely-
reason that they showed on film.
And that's the plot, is that, Gosling goes
Just
through
like
an existential crisis, I think, because he finds out he's just an accessory, basically. And this is
there's
what
got to be a scene in that movie where they show that he doesn't have any genitalia, right? I mean, has anybody seen it? But
I'm seeing it Monday. I'll report back.
a real man. We don't want a real man. Why isn't it a real man like the Ken doll who's anatomically neutered? And by the way, my sisters all played with Barbies. I have 3 younger sisters, so I got a little jealous, and then I got the Ken shaving doll. So I did play with a Ken shaving doll where you write on his face with marker, and then you have a little razor that wipes it off. So I
seriously, I didn't have that when I was a kid.
Well, you're too old for that, I guess. I don't know. It was mid '80s.
That type of technology was not developed
right.
until I was in my late 40s.
So I dabbled in Barbie play, I will say, but there is propaganda to this movie, but it's not this woke propaganda. It's propaganda of your toys are what make you who you are. Like Emma was saying, our brands. What are we without our brands? Identify with your brands. You remember that book, Sam? You did a review with the author where the brands set off the same area in the fMRI as the religious symbolism and all these things. People identify with these things. They're just exploiting your connection to a beloved brand because of your mammalian, whatever, reptilian brainstem reactions. Like I went to see G.I. Joe to get $15 or whatever it is out of your pocket. That's the propaganda. And to the extent there's any cultural content, it's window dressing to me. And again, I haven't seen it, so maybe it's great. Like I saw the Lego movie. That was actually entertaining and fun and managed to make a kind of
you like the G.I. Joe movie, you like the Lego movie, but when it comes to Barbies,
hook me up to the fMRI. Well,
I saw the Lego movie too.
No, I know, but my point is that
I didn't see any of these.
Yeah. Well, if I don't know if they made the Easy Bake Oven or something, Sam, what'd you play with? But if there was it's because the programming I couldn't resist because I was programmed. That's my point. Once I got there, I'm like, oh, this is actually pretty good. But I don't have the Barbie programming, so it's more of a challenge for me to want to go see it. And then maybe if I did see it, I would find some sort of redeeming value to it. But it's still pernicious. Just because I went to see the G.I. Joe movie doesn't mean I think it's a great thing that exists, or the Lego movie. That's the propaganda, is your brands are your God, and we will continually feed that proclivity to you as long as you'll come see it. So when people are saying, "Oh, it's saving the movies," I don't share that.
How is it saving the movies? What?
Because people are going to the movies to see a movie. This is all this hype. This and Oppenheimer too, if you want to talk about that.
Why, is this something you want to see on the big screen? Is that it?
Yes. Yeah. Well, people are going, like my friends and I are going. Me and my girly friends are going to go, and we're going to go see it on Monday. I'm seeing Oppenheimer on Saturday with family. But and I'm hoping that the politics of it are not horrible, but I don't know if I have great hope for that because no one's making it.
Christopher Nolan's a bit of a crypto fascist, but
it is the reason people are saying it's saving the movies, Sam, is that it's not a freaking superhero movie, and that people are excited to see these more cinematic, high budget films that are not freaking the Avengers, which I support. I mean, I
think that's good, but I gotta say, Emma, we've moved from superheroes to commodities.
To brands, but Oppenheimer's not.
Marvel is just the same thing. It's a brand that I grew up identifying with, and I was so excited to go see it because I was just like a robot. Yes, go see them on the big screen.
But it depends on what we're doing with it. I know that if Barbie's subversive in some way, I think there's value to it, even if it is just about the brand. I mean,
if you want a really subversive Barbie movie, go seek out on the internet Todd Haynes' movie Superstar that was actually banned by Mattel. Mattel would not let out something that was actually subversive if it didn't serve their commercial purposes.
Of course.
So Todd Haynes made a movie all with Barbie dolls about the life story of Karen Carpenter, and it is brilliant. It is genius. It is amazing, but it's also completely unseeable except for on a bootleg on YouTube because Mattel sued him to within an inch of his life. But I think that it's possible to make a good Barbie movie, and that's an example.
Well, Matthew, I appreciate your take on Barbie. Excellent take for someone who has not seen the movie.
Thank you.
Women for us.
But
I didn't mean to go too hard on you, Matthew. I'm just like, look, I have basic taste. That's part of it as well. But like, I really think we on the left have to enjoy things. Like, this is going to be a fun thing, and we all should just enjoy things.
Yes, by all means.
She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
So do you enjoy things? Really? Do you? Do you like
I guess I don't enjoy West Virginia
Yeah.
sushi. Yeah.
If
hold
would show
down-
you his Barbie collection, maybe that would have been something different.
I will hold down the not enjoy things for the sake
I
of
want
the
you on
balance
that
on the
wall.
show.
I want you on that wall.
Matthew.
Yes.
Now let's hear your recommendation. We've heard the Barbie talk. Your recommendation. Is it Superstar?
Well, I mean, that was byproduct of it. So by all means, if you can go on YouTube and seek that out, I suggest you do. It wasn't what I had prepared for today. I wanted to just briefly mention that I went last night to the season 3 premiere of How To with John Wilson, which is also on HBO. I don't know if anybody's a fan of that.
Yeah.
What is it? I never even heard of it.
show.
You would love it, Sam. You would absolutely love it.
Really?
He's in the Ross McElwee kind of genre of the
Does he do
personal
home
documentary.
inspections?
Nathan Fielder produces it, right? If I'm
Nathan
not
Fielder,
mistaken.
he's on that. Yes, he's one of the executive producers. He does these little like semi-personal documentaries that are ostensibly how-to videos, which came from his own independent film work. And HBO gave him a show, so every episode is like how to enjoy wine, how to find a parking spot. They're very
The parking one is
New York
great.
based- New York based, yeah. All of it is recommended. I just saw the first 2 episodes of season 3. And I'm excited for it. I got to talk to the editors a little bit and talk to them how they make this show. It's really amazing. So if
Put it
you
in
like
my
that
phone
kind of
because
stuff,
I'm always looking for stuff to watch. You know that.
they're 28 minutes, so they're short. They're not a big commitment, but the seasons are wonderful. So that's on a streaming level. Seek that out. It's really, really funny.
Okay.
I also just want to shout out that I was briefly on Matt's show Left Reckoning, where we watched the
Yes.
Prairie Fire trilogy, where we talked about it, and I saw you checked out Northern Lights after that too, Matt. That's cool.
Yeah,
Rob-
I'd watched Northern Lights sort of sped up before, like years ago, but watching it as it should be, very emotional scenes in that film. There's one scene where the farmer woman, there's been a death, and she's like, "Can I just take a day?" And they're like, "Well, there's work to be done." And she goes straight to the stove, and it almost made me tear up on the Twitch stream.
Well, where can I find Northern Lights?
It's on YouTube.
Yeah, Rob Nilsson. It won an award at the Cannes Film Festival, and I think it played at one of the earliest Sundance film festivals too. But Rob Nilsson's a real dyed-in-the-wool independent guy, kind of in the Cassavetes tradition. He made some other great movies, Heat and Sunlight, Signal 7. So I recommend all of his work. But that's sort of a footnote. I wanted to bring this film to everybody here because it's a female filmmaker. She's independent. I just showed it in my online film appreciation class, and it's really it's a soul-searing work. It takes a little bit more attention, which is what I sort of specialize in that class. Her name is Nina Menkes. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of her. The movie is called Queen of Diamonds, and it's on the Criterion Channel. And it's basically, I kind of describe her as a neo-realist David Lynch, and she has some of that Chantal Akerman long take, kind of no dialogue, almost abstract kind of filmmaking. But this is ostensibly about a woman who's a blackjack dealer in Las Vegas, and it is the single most just honest, just dark vision of what it's like. It's sort of a capitalist critique. You could read a feminist critique. It's there's sort of going nowhere fast in Las Vegas, and it is the complete antithesis to any movie that's all Viva Las Vegas, swingers, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And it is just a damning portrait of wage slavery, basically. And it's a singular experience. I highly recommend it. So Queen of Diamonds, if anybody's
Queen of
checked it out.
Diamonds.
And Nina Menkes also describes herself as a witch. So there's a kind of alchemical thing that she does in her films too. But they're also very kind of documentary-esque. So it's a great mix of styles. It's the first of her films that I've seen, so I'm excited to see more of her stuff.
Interesting. Well, that sounds interesting. And there's no dolls in that movie at all or anything like that?
I mean, there's some weird shit. I won't lie to you, but no, it's all featuring human beings in one form or another, and the landscape of Las Vegas and the sort of.
When was it shot?
1991.
Oh, that's interesting because it's going to be a dramatically different Las Vegas in 1991 than it is today. I mean, I actually, in fact, in 1991, I camped outside of Las Vegas. My girlfriend at the time was an architecture student, was doing her thesis on building a retirement a facility in Las Vegas, because it right around then was like Las Vegas was actually starting to begin to deal with the issue of people actually living there.
You know, that is so interesting. This movie has a scene where she's taking care of somebody at sort of end of life care as one of her side jobs. It's very interesting. You bring that up.
And I still have she popped out of we rented a what do you call it? A car with one of those
drop tops?
Skylights.
Oh.
And
stretch Hummer?
No, it was skylight and took photos all the way down, and the whole topography of Las Vegas has changed dramatically. And of course, our old friend Ross Broccoli, he at one point was going to make a movie there about the urban sprawl. So over the years, sort of tracked that a little bit too. That's a very different Las Vegas at that time. And this was made in 1991.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. It's not on Criterion. It's on Mubi. You got to check it out on Mubi.
Mubi?
Yeah, MUBI. And I think it may be able to be purchased on Amazon too if you have a subscription through there.
What is MUBI?
It's called Mubi.
Okay, great. Thank you, Matthew Film Guy.
Whoopsie.
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 And also,
Matthew,
thank you. I needed to
I
have
love
one.
the echo on that. I love the echo on that.
That's a great addition.
Well, Matthew Film Guy, it's been great. I know that you want to sign off so that we can get to the breaking story about Steven Crowder. Well, apparently the guy, sends, pictures of his penis to some of his.
That's what it means to be a mighty man of valor.
That is shocking if that's true. I could not see that.
It's always who you least suspect.
Yeah. Sad.
Yep.
It's just a
So
joke,
surprising.
man. It's just a joke.
Maybe, yeah. I don't know. Let's hear
I haven't
it.
done that bit here.
Yes, I really dropped the ball. No pun intended.
Whoopsie.
All right, Matthew Film Guy, always a pleasure, buddy. Thank you so
Pleasure
much.
for me. I just want to
Hey,
shout out the
folks.
Discord, the MR Discord. Come check it out. Hang out with us. Talk movies over there.
Talk
Everybody
movies
cool.
over there and sign up for Matthew's film learning class. Fascinating. I've had many members of my family who joined and enjoyed it over the years.
MR people too. Cool people.
So check it out. We'll put links to all of that, including Matthew's Boxed. Is that what it is?
Letterboxd.
Letterboxd. Account. There you go. All right. Well, quick break, and we'll be right back. In fact, no, let's just say goodbye to Matthew.
Bye.
Goodbye, Matthew.
Bye.
And there you go. So you have to cut him off. Otherwise, he keeps talking. And you know what? We're only a half hour. We're Freebie Friday.
There we go.
Freebie
There we
Friday.
go.
What are you going to do? We don't have time for this. We don't have time for, taking a break or anything like that. Freebie Friday. You're welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Legitimacy maintenance. Moist skin, oily hair, yellow, crusty underwear, a big man, a small trough. Sometimes life can be an everlasting spiral of torment and ironic comeuppance. Holy shit, Sam, is hope
You
toxic.
doing okay?
I don't know what that is.
I don't know. It sounds. Hope,
was a
hope
very
that-
weird comment.
Hope that person's okay.
Is that me? I mean, I don't think that's me. Sam's Tight Pants. Happy Friday, MR crew. Reporting from Georgia. I'm here to proclaim that you can write off Brian Kemp as a late entrant into the Republican primary. One of his two top comms guy, Cody Hall, is going to the DeSantis campaign. Also, in the last few days, Kemp did an interview where he said he's absolutely support Trump if he was the nominee. Meanwhile, met with McConnell and Daines behind closed doors. Kemp is already prepping for the 2026 run against Ossoff. Kemp is term limited as governor, and the only person that could give Kemp for a run for his money is Marjorie Taylor Greene. Yeah, If Dems win back the House, I think she gets bored and she tries to do the Senate. Oh, and Kelly Loeffler wants to run again. Still a close call whether Biden will win Georgia again this cycle, but Ossoff had a great chance in his run, even if against Kemp. Left his best. Interesting. Vermont Ben. I am seeing Barbie in 3 hours. Do not spoil me. Matt makes a great point that Kropotkin also makes in Conquest of Bread. If we all spent less time working to survive because we more effectively pooled resources for food, shelter, etc., we would all have more time for artistic, creative pursuits. Can you ask Ryan if he thinks a global conspiracy spearheaded by the science community in the United States suppressed the possibility of COVID-19 leaked from the Wuhan lab in order to prevent Trump from launching a nuclear strike on China? No, I don't think that's... Brianna Wu. Sam, this is Brianna Wu. Check your Twitter DMs. I can get one of those libertarian presidential candidates to debate you. Oh, fantastic. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's got to be that time of...
Yes. Richard Middens. Isn't it about time for Sam to admit RFK is a deranged lunatic and a disgusting racist? I mean, honestly, I don't think that Kennedy is a racist. I think he's been, without a doubt, transmitting like racist tropes in some way. But I think deranged lunatic is a little bit strong, but yes, I do think that there is something wrong that is driving him. You know, I don't know what more.
I'm not sure what's served by going into like.
Yeah, I'm not. Honestly, like, you know, we're going over the material, we're debunking it. I would not recommend that anybody ever vote for him. We're going over this. It's not like we're avoiding it in any way, and I think we're actually spending more time talking about him than just about any other candidate. I mean, originally, my plan was to wait until the fall and probably interview sort of the range of candidates that might be, you know, within our sphere of basically being able to interview, and also, you know, that are relevant to what we're doing. I mean, it's not inconceivable to me that I will have an opportunity, whether planned or unplanned, to you know, to essentially, I don't want to say confront Bobby on these things, but to challenge him on these things. And my hope is, you know, we'll see what candidates are around of people that we like. Understand it's not an endorsement to interview these people. But there are some ideas that I like and some I don't, and we'll get there. But let's do this last clip of RFK Jr. He was speaking in front of the, or was asked to testify, we should say, on the House weaponization of the federal government committee hearing. We played what I think is the most damning clips up front on this program, where RFK, in the course of being questioned by Representative Thomas Massey, basically lays out these things as to why what he was spreading is not in misinformation, and basically implying that, like, it's misinformation to say that the vaccines worked, and for some reason we had far worse death rates and all that. We played that clip where the Twitter user, The Real Truther, debunks all of those things. And again, you know, pass that clip around and go check out the Real Truther on Twitter. Here is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. claiming that it is also defamation to call him an anti-vaxxer, and that he never tells people not to get a vaccine. Will you play that clip, Bradley?
Yes, Congressman Massey, and if by your leave, I'd like to just respond briefly to some of the what I would call defamations that have been just applied to me by the ranking member. I'm happy to talk to you about my opinions on these issues. What you have stated and tried to associate me with through guilt by association is simply inaccurate. Virtually everything, every statement that you just made about me is inaccurate. I have never advised Black Americans not to receive vaccines. At one point you say I'm anti-vax, and that's a bad thing. The other moment you point out that all my children are vax. I'm fully compliant with the vaccine schedule myself, except for COVID. I took flu vaccines for 20 years straight. I have never been anti-vax. I have never told the public avoid vaccination. The only thing I've asked for.
Pause it. Okay. First off, I'm not familiar with the accusation about telling Black people not to get vaccines. We do know that there was problems. I think was it with Somali?
Samoa.
Was it? It was Samoa?
American Samoa, I believe. Yeah, I'm going to confirm.
Okay, just check with that. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I've got confused between I think like a Wakefield, but there is a story out there about Kennedy's organization going. I think was it to Samoa?
Yep, Samoa.
And recommending that they don't take the MMR vaccine? Was it measles?
Measles, mumps, rubella.
And it was successful in convincing people not to take that, and there was I think dozens of deaths as a function of that with measles. I don't know. People can read into that, but put that aside.
Ars Technica piece, yeah.
And what he's referencing about Black Americans is a documentary that he made about Black Americans and vaccine hesitancy, and at one point he compares Black Americans taking vaccines to like the Tuskegee Airmen experiments.
Right. And it wasn't American Samoa, it was just Samoa.
And I also just want to point out that
I want to go to, I just want to, while this is fresh in mind, we can talk about it. He says that he has never publicly told people not to get vaccines, and that the claim that he did or has is defamatory. Here is a clip of Kennedy on a program entitled Health Freedom for Humanity podcast in September of 2021.
And I think now those days are over. Our job is to resist and to talk about it to everybody. If you're walking down the street, and I do this now myself, which is, I don't want to do, I'm not a busybody. I see somebody on a hiking trail carrying a little baby, and I say to him, better not get him vaccinated. And he heard that from me. If he hears it from 10 other people, maybe he won't do it. Maybe he will save that child. And before we were all quiet because we wanted to get along with our families. We just take endless flack. If you talk about this issue, you're scared you're going to get marginalized in your community, that people are going to call you crazy or whatever. But now's the time. Come out of the closet now.
I mean, maybe he forgot he did that.
And in his testimony, he said that he keeps talking about his children's vaccinations, his flu vaccinations, and that it just started with COVID, which is factually incorrect given like his work over the past decade plus on this front. But I mean, this kind of comes back to some of what we talked about really within the context of 2IT, right? Which is like, I don't really care that much about what's going on in your personal life within the context of like what we're critiquing. We're critiquing what's being put out there into the public. And so even if he was privately vaccinated, or even if he does stuff in his own private life, like that's immaterial to us, at least. I mean, in his instance, when they had those vaccine mandates, I guess that was reported at a party that he threw with his wife, like that highlights the hypocrisy, I guess. But the real thing that we're analyzing here is what you're advocating and what you're putting out there, and then the natural conclusion people draw from that. You don't need to say, don't get vaccinated to be an anti-vaxxer. You can just regurgitate public misinformation to the public constantly, and then that, is gonna be the thing that we're critiquing.
Yeah, you validate anxieties that have been put there by anti-vaxxers. And yeah, the Ars Technica piece, measles outbreak spurred by anti-vaxxers shuts down government's mode. People should check this article out by Ars Technica.
Right.
Bullprog, to be fair, how many people watched that episode of the Medical News for Liberty-Loving Free Thinkers podcast? I don't know. I don't know how many people watched the...
I mean, there's more people watching that stuff. For all the talk we talk about, censorship and stuff, like there's way more people watching that stuff on YouTube than there is people watching the debunkers by actually qualified people.
Right. If you want to, yeah. I mean, that's, I think, I'm sorry. I mean, like the issue is, are you doing this in public? Right? Like, I mean, that's what he's saying. And
it's chicken shit. Like, honestly, that's the same thing as like, I'm going to use the word targeted, but then back off what that actually means. Like,
right.
It's like, it's chicken shit.
And the public, I mean, the people that are already that deep in the wormhole, they'll know that, oh, he has to come out and say this. That's what they justified it with Trump or with any white supremacist, who they back. They are familiar with the concept of doublespeak to a broader audience, and that it's been years and years of conservatives being primed to be okay with that.
Let's check in on on Governor DeSantis. Well, before we do that, this is an important story. On Wednesday, the Florida board that sets curriculum for schools. This is their follow-up again to where the heck is that paper? This is their follow-up to their sort of don't say gay, don't be woke in schools. In other words, let's be careful about teaching. In fact, this story is from Politico. New standards for the State Board of Education encompasses the controversial 2022 law regulating how race can be taught in Florida schools, something specifically sought by DeSantis. And the state tweaked its history curriculum to match the so-called Stop Woke law that takes aim at lessons over issues like white privilege by creating new protections for students and workers, including that a person should not be instructed to, quote, feel guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress due to their race, color, sex, or national origin.
A safe space.
Now, obviously, I don't think that teachers should be picking on specific students and saying, you should feel guilty for this thing that took place in history, or you should feel guilty because, this person did that, because
unless their name is Jefferson Davis V, in which case maybe you make a slight exception for the third grade teacher and you can go off on that kid.
But that said, the point is like the way this gets applied in the classroom is that you back off teaching things that some people may feel bad about, because some teacher, some parent is going to say, all this talk of slavery has made my kid feel bad about himself. Because I'll tell you something, I took my kids to Monticello a couple of weeks ago. We learned about, the enslaved people that Thomas Jefferson owned. We learned about how many of them were sold to pay off his bills in life. My kids came away feeling that Thomas Jefferson was a hypocrite, They had an awareness and appreciation, obviously, of what the good things he did. They're also able, one's almost 18, one's 10, to say, there's some huge hypocrisy here. And it makes them, I think, also made them sort of feel like, how did we as white people get into this position in our country with this as the history, and reflect on it. It's not inconceivable to me that my son could say, like, I feel bad for what white people did. And the idea that type of, instruction and history lesson wouldn't be taught because my son might react adversely to it is bizarre. Some of the issues raised around surrenders include instruction on, quote, how slave developed skills, which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit.
Ooh,
Lessons
boy.
that touch on acts of violence perpetrated against and by African Americans.
Oh, against and by. Right. There's total symmetry. There's total symmetry here in what we're talking about.
Wait, so is that saying you can teach black on black crime? Or what does that
No,
say?
I mean, hey, like, it's not super clear, but they could talk about how, in theory, slave rebellions, they really shouldn't have done that. They should have just kind of taken the tranquilizing drug of gradualism to get rid of the institution of slavery.
So to highlight the idea, let's say, that one of Thomas Jefferson's enslaved people, whom Jefferson brought to France so that Jefferson could have French food. And this enslaved person learned to be a French cook. That we're to teach this story about the personal benefits that this enslaved person got. All this free French cooking training that once he negotiated with Jefferson, because they were there in France when the French Revolution happened, and this enslaved person could actually be free. Once he negotiated with Jefferson, I'll come back to the States with you, but you need to let me be free 6 years from now. He had the ability to go off and make his own French meals for himself. Now, of course, the opportunity that was afforded to him probably as a freed slave would have been limited enough that you wouldn't necessarily have the same ingredients, access to the same ingredients, or the same opportunities to work with the same type of cooking utensils or whatnot. But even if that weren't the case, here he is. Slavery was difficult. I was enslaved for decades. Much of my life was as a piece of chattel. But the upside, I'm a French cook now.
Yeah.
And
Check
I can
out these
cook
waffles.
myself some crepes. So, that's to make that the focus of teaching slavery, where any skills learned were only allowed if it benefited the slave master, is just bizarre and creepy. And this is just the beginning. They're not going to stop with this assault on the way that they're teaching students.
And it's infantile. Like there's the message about like sort of guilt and the construction of whiteness and like how you're implicated in that as a person. That's definitely like something that should be considered. I've been to Monticello myself as a 6th grader, and I did think about those things, and they taught it in a way that I think conservatives would describe as woke even now. But I think there's another like lesson that you can come away with, which is that actually our country decided to do away with this like plantation style economy, in part for like sort of self-interested reasons of the North, but also because it was an appalling embarrassment to the nation.
Yeah.
And like that was done in part by like massive slave rebellions, but also by white people putting their lives on the line. And like I think getting most white people are not. I mean, I say this as a North Dakotan, so I'd like where my European ancestors came in like the late 1800s, but like to the extent that like most white people have that have ancestors here for long enough have like a a slave owner in their ancestry. I think that's definitely worth like dwelling on. I think we should also focus on like a lot of white people were brought here as like prison laborers and stuff like that too. And yeah, exactly. And like I think there's a broader way than just like the color of people's skin to interpret that stuff. And like when conservatives act like there's only one way to interpret that stuff, I think that's what's really lost.
Well, and I just want to say too, like the conservatives, I'm old enough to remember when they were talking about how liberals want everyone to get a participation trophy and no one to win first place. And like in their mind, they were saying it was the liberals who were trying to protect children from the harsh realities of being a winner and a loser. Well, it's actually you guys that are coddling them, because in fact, children reckoning with feelings of maybe like personal guilt as they study systemic issues, it's probably a pretty healthy emotional and mental exercise. And like they're the ones trying to protect them from seeing anybody that's a little bit different from them that might give them a certain kind of feeling, or hearing about systems of slavery and not just flag waving. That is the coddling of children, as opposed to what like the left is trying to do, which is expose them to reality.
Yeah.
The one of the interesting things that we learned there, and Lefty band teacher brings this up, slaves are gifted the skills of French cuisine, but reading was illegal. Go figure, huh? Well, it wasn't just reading. It was also writing, because what they were very concerned with was enslaved people writing their own papers, forging papers that suggested that they were freed. In fact, there was a story, and I can't recall it now, of one of the enslaved people for Jefferson, enslaved by Jefferson, saving up, selling some stuff on the side that he was producing to buy forged papers as a way of escaping. But because he could not read nor write, he did not realize that the papers were completely nonsensical. He bought the papers. When he had to ultimately show them, they were clearly like they didn't make any sense. And he was, returned back to enslavement in that instance.
Yeah.
So there were some personal benefits, but just ones that wouldn't inhibit their ability to be chattel.
It's like, it's wild how again infantile and mythic and Disneyfied our understanding of this is. Like, how many people know who actually William Wells Brown is? That he is the first African American novelist in this country. That his book Clotel was the full title was Clotel or the President's Daughter, was about Thomas Jefferson and his mixed race daughters, and that he had to leave in the late 1840s into the 1850s because of the Fugitive Slave Acts. Because even as America's first black novelist, he wasn't safe from being recaptured and put into chattel slavery. Like that's what we're actually dealing with. And I'd say I talked to even a lot of black people, like unless they're like our English majors or something like that, or are otherwise interested in novels, people don't know William Wells Brown's name.
Right. Meanwhile, also in Florida, let's play this clip of Ron DeSantis, who in his flailing campaign, they are cash strapped. All of his top big money donors have basically tapped out, right? There's only so many you can have of those big donors. There's only so much money they can contribute.
And they're not going to contribute when you're currently in a national poll. I saw tied with Vivek Ramaswamy. I mean, again, that's just one poll, but he's distant second by most metrics.
Yes.
Trump.
And he's also losing, like there's a big, personnel shakeup. So what is he going to do? He's going to come out with a bold new program to deal with the material interests of the American public. I'm sorry. He's going to sue Bud Light for having a trans person promote their product.
Bud Light went woke and first responders went broke. So Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is calling on the board, who runs the Florida Pension Fund, to sell all InBev stock, unload Bud Light, and get out while they can. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis joins me now. So, Governor, how badly did this pension take a hit?
No,
He can't even
well,
smile.
we had over $50 million worth of InBev stock in the pension. Of course, Florida's pension fund's about $180 billion. So it's a pretty big endeavor, but it has absolutely hurt teachers. It has absolutely hurt other pensioners. And, we talk about woke corporations, and a lot of times we focus on, understandably, how they're trying to change society, get involved
Pause it
in
for one
politics.
second. Now, wait a second. Just to be clear, is this story about how people like Jesse Waters and Ron DeSantis, in causing a boycott of Bud Light, have harmed teachers and first responders? Is that what this video is about? Do I have that right, Bradley?
Yes, because I think it'll harm their pensions.
Right. Is that what the video is about? They're criticizing themselves for going on this this attacking of. Is that what it is? Oh no, it isn't. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Other pensioners. And, we talk about woke corporations, and a lot of times we focus on, understandably, how they're trying to change society, get involved in politics, and we fight back against that. We did that against Disney and others, and that's important. But the flip side of it is just as you suggest, when you start pursuing a political agenda at the expense of your shareholders, that's not just impacting very wealthy people, it impacts hardworking people who were police officers, firefighters, and teachers in terms of the pension. So what we're doing, since we do have these shares, we believe that when you take your eye off the ball like that, you're not following your fiduciary duty to do the best you can for your shareholders. So we're going to be launching an inquiry about Bud Light and InBev, and it could be something that leads to a derivative lawsuit filed on behalf of the shareholders of the Florida pension fund, because at the end of the day, there's got to be penalties for when you put business aside to focus on your social agenda at the expense of hardworking people.
Are you looking at Disney too?
Are you looking at yourself? I love the idea of DeSantis has emptied the clip on every culture war thing he could possibly do. He's done the Stop Woke Act. He's shipped migrants to Martha's Vineyard. He's done anti-CRT stuff. I mean, he has done everything possible, and his team's like, maybe one more stunt will do it.
Ron DeSantis is to this presidential campaign like Laura Loomer was to Twitter. Remember when she handcuffed herself to the door on Twitter?
He's a volume shooter.
More and more he's just the level of desperation associated with this is fascinating.
Yeah,
I mean, and you're absolutely right. The idea that this has been going so well for me to pursue this, this anti-woke campaign, I'm going to double down on it. And and of course, I mean, I hope this goes without saying,
quintuple.
There is not a single corporation that engages in any activity, and these big corporations, that engages in any activity that isn't ultimately perceived by them to be beneficial to their business interests, period, end of story. It may be the case that what they do in some way is consistent with stuff that is good for society, but their motivation for doing this is always 100% because we need to build our brand in a positive way. That doesn't mean that the individuals in there aren't, happy about it, but nobody is going to make a move. There is not a single person who sits atop the leadership of a corporation who says, this is going to be bad for business, but we're going to do it anyways.
It's illegal if you're a publicly traded company, you have a fiduciary duty to your shareholders as enshrined by U.S. case law. So, it's just, this is all such a farce. He can't even smile. He can't even talk. And another aesthetic point, I like how Jesse's trying to differentiate himself. Instead of sitting like Tucker did, he's going to stand.
Is he standing the whole show?
I don't know.
He looks awkward.
Yeah, yeah.
He'll be sitting. He'll just give him a month or two and he'll be sitting.
I think he needs a facelift with the weight loss.
let's
Oh.
let me read a Nabiki Tendo. Hi, I'm new here. Hope this works. I'd recommend you have on Andrew Seidel. He's a constitutional attorney who wrote the book American Crusade, How the Supreme Court is Weaponizing Religious Freedom. I've asked him before, and he said he'd love to be a guest. Didn't we write that down?
I'll check my notes, but I remember the name. Yeah.
Okay, let's see if we can look into that. That sounds interesting. Charlie, sure. If you're looking back on history in America and you feel bad or guilty, that's not a sign that you're the bad guy. It's a sign that you're a human being who recognizes the awful things leaders were taught to lionize. We are taught to lionize. Did it makes you better than them in a way because they knew what they were doing was wrong and did it anyway. Don't be ashamed. Be furious. This is why American mythology needs to die for good. Left is best. Trans right forever. MN Minnesota Teamster. U.S. Chamber of Commerce is lobbying the White House to prevent a UPS Teamster from striking. Sent you their letter. I cannot imagine that happens. Teacher Lauren, like DeSantis, gives an F about the teacher retirement system, of course. Jesus Christ, Jesse Waters just staring in DeSantis's soul, says bourbon enthusiast. Judy Ruliani, I hate what Jesse Waters does with his hands at the beginning of the Ronnie the Rat segment. Vic Berger material right there. Lawful awful. Sam, how long before DeSantis requires all middle school curricula to include PragerU's Slavery Wasn't That Bad video? I mean,
I would be shocked if PragerU has not been played by a teacher to a grade school class at least once in this country.
Without a doubt. Should we go into Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Crowder?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, folks. I forgot about this. Steven Crowder's had a tough couple of months. I mean, really. Now, I just want to, start off by saying, like, Emma wants to talk about this story. And, but I was like, we should not have stories that make me feel guilty on the show. Like, based upon what goes on in Florida, it's, my sensitivities, because a lot of people are saying, like, that this guy is, like, sort of like, a whole disintegration of his career, his marriage was in the wake of Ethan Klein inviting me on his program to confront Crowder. And I just want to say, like, there's a little bit of guilt, but we're going to go forward with this.
But I mean, you really should not be caving to those kind of leftist soft sensibilities, Sam. You have to expose yourself to ideas even if they make you uncomfortable.
Expose yourself.
And information. I use that term.
Folks, this came up in Mediate. This came up in Mediate. Put up the headline if you would, Bradley. Exclusive. Steven Crowder sent photos of his genitals and exchanged drugs in super creepy workplace. Ex-staffers say. Hey, I wonder.
Let's find out.
Let's see here. They give a little bit of up top, a little bit of talk about Steven Crowder, the divorce, and there had been alleged workplace misconduct threatens. He, was offered, I guess, $50 million from Daily Wire, but insisted that he get more. Earlier this month, after repeated suspensions, with Crowder decamped from YouTube, where it commanded a mighty audience of 5 million subscribers, to Rumble, a less regulated but much smaller alternative. The show's audience has dwindled on Rumble to the point where his last 5 shows have averaged some 288,000 viewers. I mean, that's still pretty good. That's a lot of numbers.
To the extent we can trust it.
To the extent that we can trust it. It's a lot of people watching his show. But then they get into the troubles, apparently. One former Louder with Crowder employee told Mediate that during his time on the show, he received unsolicited, sexually graphic texts that included photos of Crowder's genitalia. Those texts and images were reviewed by Mediate. In the moment, we dismissed it as sort of frat boy humor. In hindsight, it's super creepy and felt groomer-ish.
It's kind of like all frat boy.
What's that?
That's like general to frat boy behavior. I feel like at the
Although-
time it feels like this
Right,
is just
those are
childish.
not mutually exclusive.
Right, totally.
things.
But if the frat boy was also, constantly talking about the threat of LGBTQ people and groomers and using his platform in order to spread hate about gay people, the fact that he is sending photos of his genitalia, which Mediaite saw as well and confirmed, it seems, to his male colleagues, that's just interesting.
Here's the
or
weird part.
employees, I
look,
should say.
I mean, maybe it is frat boy humor, but this employee, ex-employee, said, described it this way: like he was always testing people's comfort levels with that kind of behavior. Because he was the boss, though, and had no accountability, it just continued to happen. There was no one trusted to complain to.
What, you can't go to his dad?
Exactly. The former employee alleged that Crowder habitually exposed himself to other male staffers, a claim backed up by two other sources. So, it wasn't just sending pictures of dick pics to staffers, but he also would do it in person. It's weird that the only thing that I think is weird about this, I mean, because look, I'm a boss. We all do this, but it's weird that he would expose himself to all the male staffers, but only sent dick pics to one male staffer, according to this, anyways. But maybe there was more. I don't know. He only exposed himself to male staffers. It happened all the time. It was a regular occurrence. It usually happened when he was in a really good sort of manic mood. So while we were all disgusted by it, it was never welcomed. It was preferable to him being in a bad mood and how he treated people in that state.
Oh my God. Fun
Yep.
workplace.
Yes. And then in response to a request for comment, Louder with Crowder CEO Gerald Morgan Jr., isn't he the co-host, right? Yeah.
Right.
He had some problems apparently way back. I'm not exactly sure what they were off the top of my head, but while Louder with Crowder does not provide details on personal, private medical matters or personnel issues, it's important to note that many of these claims are missing context, clear misrepresentation, or outright falsehoods. I mean, sometimes there could be a context.
For a dick pic?
Yeah.
I mean,
probably not a workplace context.
Again, Mediaite reviewed the texts and the photos and independently verified that it seemed legit. There's really seemingly no question here, especially because we covered this from the New York Post a few months ago, which also spoke about, with multiple sources who worked there, him exposing himself to them and placing his genitals on their shoulder, for example. So this is the second article, very well sourced, very well researched seemingly, that verifies this.
I'd encourage Gerald Morgan Jr. to delineate which are the claims that are missing context, which are clear misrepresentations, and which are outright falsehoods, instead of just collapsing them all into one thing.
I'm going to bet that he's not going to do that. Now, this is interesting. Another source close to Crowder also said they witnessed him expose himself to male staff in the office, but chalked it up to childish behavior. Now, in this instance, and this is interesting, this is important to sort of read these articles carefully. Mediaite uses the pronoun they. Now, there's one of three reasons why they did this. One, the person is non-binary. It's conceivable to me, that it's hard for me to imagine a non-binary person working for Steven Crowder. I'm sorry.
Run.
But it's conceivable that maybe someone decided they were non-binary after having worked there. Or what I think is more likely is that Mediaite is hiding the gender of this person because it's very sensitive. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the gender is female. it doesn't necessarily mean that it's male, but it's a way of trying to create a certain amount of question around it. Because, and listen to the quote, I have personally witnessed that on one occasion, they said. My personal theory is he's a man-child and just thinks it's funny, like boys in middle school playing pranks on each other in the locker room. That, to me, seems to be his mentality. Could it be a power move? Possibly, they said. He does virtually nothing that a grown man should do for himself. Wash his own laundry, prepare his own food, buy his own groceries. Most of the time, someone else does that for him. So he's like a child that needs to be taken care of, and his humor reflects that type of childish behavior. How would you characterize that description?
Focusing on him being a man-child that doesn't do, let's say domestic chores for himself and has somebody else do that? Yeah, interesting.
Well, but I mean, to me, that's an excuse.
I agree.
That to me sounds like someone who is trying to sort of like, maybe, you know, like it's a limited hangout, as it were.
Yes.
And
a source
so
close to Crowder. This is not.
I'm betting that's
a
Gerald
former
Morgan.
employee. Well spotted, Sam. It's a
I'm
source.
betting that's Gerald Morgan. I mean, that's my guess, anyways. That's somebody. Maybe it's not Gerald Morgan, but it is someone close to Crowder,
right?
Who is trying to sort of like come up with an alternate theory.
Yes.
And,
Because
you know,
the
part
rest of it is former employees being quoted, as opposed to now this is a source close to Crowder,
Right.
whose gender is also being hidden.
And how that could have worked as a journalist, like reach out for comment, and so you get the like mention of Gerald up top, but then you get like, hey, on background.
Hey, I'll say this on background.
Yeah,
Yep.
can you give me like a little bit more context?
Can I identify you as a source close to Crowder? Yes, you can. But I don't want you to use my gender. That way it's more obscured. I mean, maybe it's that CEO, maybe it's somebody else, but it's someone who is trying to mitigate the damage on Crowder. There is no doubt in my mind. Another former employee, and now we're back to former employees, said incidents of general exposure in the workplace were so routine that they became almost unremarkable. The guys just talked about it amongst themselves, and I don't want to say it became normal but it became less of a big deal. So there's a case to be made. He was grooming employees, the former employee said. Stephen may excuse some of that, saying he was friends with some of his employees, but that again draws some questions. There are power dynamics at play, regardless of how friendly you are with staff. Also, don't send your penis in a message. So gross.
Oh, there are power dynamics in the workplace, meaning that
kinda woke.
there's like
That's
some
weird.
difference, power differential in the contract. It's not just one between two equal parties.
This is the weirder part to me, to be honest with you. Like, you know, it's one thing to come and say like, oh, it's just man-child, you know, and like, you know, I've been around comedians and I've seen comedians do gross stuff around there. It's not appropriate in my mind, you know. It's one thing for friends to be doing this out and, I'm not with each other outside of work. It's another when you're the boss.
Yeah.
But they're trying to play it off like it's his comedian mentality. A different ex-staffer said Crowder would often make uncomfortable comments during a men's-only Bible study he held in 2021. You know, when you're really showing your comedy chops.
Yeah, get those jokes off.
The staffer said Crowder frequently remarked that, quote, men used to be more physically intimate with each other, and then, quote, would reference a passage from the Bible where Abraham's servant put his hand on Abraham's inner thigh to be closer to Abraham's descendants' balls. That being that your descendants will come from your genitalia and your semen and your testicles will...
Pretty hot homoerotic Bible section.
Now, look, I have obviously no problem with homoeroticism. I don't know that you should, be heteroerotic or homoerotic at work. Frankly, I don't think you should, particularly with your employees. But it's just fascinating to me that a guy who acknowledges that male sexual intimacy is in the Bible would be so homophobic and transphobic as this guy. That to me seems a little bit hypocritical.
I mean,
that's
I'm
saying.
I'm not saying anything about Crowder specifically, but just to speak to general dynamics, sometimes people who have those feelings overcompensate in certain ways. That does not mean that Crowder is that person. I'm just saying generally that is sometimes something that is exhibited by people who are, a little bit
that happens.
Closeted.
That happens, of course. I mean, in fact, in FUBAR, we had a whole chapter on anti-gay, gay Republicans. And it very often, the most vociferous homophobes and anti-gay, promoting legislation, turned out to, maybe they didn't self-identify as gay, but they had relations with folks of the same sex. The former employee who received genitalia photos from Crowder shared a similar sentiment about working for the YouTube star. We've often debated this. It's like any abusive relationship. When it's good, it can be really fun. Most people enjoy the work itself. When it's bad, it's really bad. But over time, most become so numb to it, they don't see how messed up the place is until they get out. Apparently, back in December of 2020, Crowder was claiming that he was going to retire. He's been having a rough go of it.
Well, yeah, so then they also say that he would hand out prescription drugs.
That's
Multiple former sources and a source close to Crowder claimed the conservative firebrand would offer and ask staffers for prescription drugs like Klonopin, an anticonvulsant used to use seizures, and is also prescribed to treat anxiety. It's like a stronger Xanax, right?
Yeah, I've heard of that.
An anticonvulsant used to treat as well as cannabis gummies and opiates like Percocet. Media reviewed text exchanges between Crowder and former employees confirming these claims.
I wonder if he'll address those.
Interesting. Well, there's some that are out of context, some that are fabrications, and some that are stretches of the truth.
Yeah.
There it is. I mean, I just hope things get better over there at, Crowder's operation. I also want to say that if you are a former Crowder employee or a current one, and you want to, be interviewed on the program or help us with anything, please feel free to reach out. majorityreporters@gmail.com. Oh my God, it's 2:51.
Yes.
All right, let's say goodbye.
Okay. All right. I had to run to the restroom, but I'll say goodbye now.
It's ridiculous.
Yes.
I didn't realize what time it was. I'm going to read 3 IMs. Why don't you say goodbye, and then I'll just sign off.
Bye, guys.
John from Moko. The numbers Kennedy pulled up in Nigeria, a pretty good example of how easy it is to lie with statistics, particularly cherry-picked ones. This isn't the only important thing needed to contextualize data like that, but I recommend people always look into the mechanism behind what's happening. Correlation in and of itself is not great evidence, indeed. Dave from Jamaica. Missed opportunity. I was hoping they would form a circle yelling, fight, fight. Peaceful marches ended slavery, as we all know. Slavery is just a skills program. All right. 4 more IMs. Rob from Dedham. Cue the Ben Shapiro take that Margot Robbie should have played Barbie because Barbie's supposed to be an American and she's Australian. Crowder should do a reverse Dave Rubin at this point. Oh, without a doubt. That would be pretty funny. Number 13. Right-wing outrage, such as Fox's attempt with Barbie criticism, cannot be taken intellectually seriously. The outrage starts at the conclusion of hatred. Reasoning for the hatred is generated after the conclusion, which is why it's inherently fallacious, cannot be rationalized. It's all just reactionary commentary for commodification without a doubt.
Yeah, it's completely unserious. They were laughing the entire time, but it's a way to talk about Hollywood without talking about like labor actions ongoing and stuff like that.
Lick butts, not boots. Marianne Williamson was interviewed by Hassan on a stream, and it was pretty good watch. Yeah, we're going to get there. Like I say, fall is really the time that we want to do this. The Dude. This has Christopher Columbus and Thanksgiving vibes. And the final IM of I guess it's really the week. Comes from Left Perf. I was looking over Langdon Boone's letterbox page and didn't see Gael Garcia Bernal's 2012 film No on there. It's a film about the 1988 campaign that became the ouster for Pinochet in Chile. Same director as Spencer. Curious about his thoughts after having seen it. Go on the Discord. Ask him. Bradley, Matt, Emma, in absentia. Great job this week. Folks, we'll see you on Monday.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar.